Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this What If story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝐼𝐼𝐬 on Wattpad. Now let's start. It was a day Izuku would never forget. He and his sister were just 4 years old, leaving preschool and climbing into the car with their mother, 𝐒𝐮𝐬. They were on their way to the quirk doctor to discover their quirks. Izumi had already begun to show signs of her quirk awakening. Objects on high counters would fall without any apparent cause, and her stuffed bear would float effortlessly. Izuku, on the other hand, had yet to display any signs of a quirk, but he was eager to find out what he might have. Perhaps a quirk like his mother's or a fire quirk like his father's. His father had passed away when the twins were only 3, leaving a significant void in their lives. However, Toshinori entered their lives soon after. He was lively, strong, and brought a sense of joy that the family desperately needed during that difficult time. 6 months after Hisashi's passing, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 married Toshinori, helping to fill the emptiness in their family. Izuku had heard stories about Toshinori's mentor, Nana Shimura. He admired how she would defeat villains and assist those in need, all while wearing a smile. She was like a grandmother to the twins, and Izuku found her inspiring, just as he did All Might. He dreamed of having a quirk that would allow him to become a hero like All Might. His mother was also a hero, the number 30 hero, Lady Magneta. Both he and Izumi aspired to follow in their mother's footsteps. All he needed was to know what his quirk was. When the test results arrived, Izuku's world crumbled. Izumi had been granted a powerful telekinesis quirk, perfect for heroics, while Izuku was declared quirkless. He struggled to comprehend the news. This had to be a mistake. Why had this happened? When they returned home that evening, the atmosphere was heavy. Toshinori congratulated Izumi on her remarkable quirk, but Izuku received only a sympathetic glance from him. The pain was sharp. He felt like a disappointment to his family, Hisashi, Nana, and himself. He refused to give up on his dream. He would find a way to become a hero, quirkless or not. He just needed to believe. 10 years later, the school year was halfway through, and the teacher reminded the students to start considering their futures. Most of the class was distracted, except for one student who was diligently taking notes about a recent villain attack. The teacher considered handing out career questionnaires but quickly dismissed the idea, tossing the papers into the air. The students began to use their quirks playfully, except for 3. The teacher acknowledged their potential to become heroes. Katsuki Bakugo, the confident ash-blonde boy, stood up, declaring that he and Izumi were not like the others in the class, whose quirks were only suitable for lesser heroes. Izumi, sitting beside him, leaned back with a smirk, echoing his sentiment. The class reacted with outrage, but the pair challenged their classmates to prove themselves. Izuku, feeling overwhelmed, wished for a moment of peace in the chaotic classroom. While the teacher praised Bakugo and Izumi for their impressive abilities and potential admission to 𝐼𝐼𝐬, the most prestigious hero school, Izuku was lost in thought, sketching the fight he had witnessed on his way to school, analyzing the techniques and quirks used. Suddenly, the room fell silent as the teacher mentioned Izuku's longing to attend 𝐼𝐬. All eyes turned to him, and he felt a wave of dread wash over him. He knew it was inappropriate for the teacher to share such personal information, but he also understood that the teacher didn't care. After all, he was quirkless. Laughter erupted in the classroom, mocking him. Izuku felt panic rise within him as he stammered that the rule against quirkless students had been removed, and he could be the first to attend. An explosion erupted on his desk as Bakugo slammed his hand down, a menacing grin on his face. Izumi expressed her disdain, clearly embarrassed by her brother's aspirations. Bakugo taunted Izuku, reminding him that despite his stepfather's connection to 𝐼𝐬, he was still a failure. Izuku tried to retreat, but he felt an invisible force pulling him back, likely from Izumi's quirk. He looked down, feeling defeated, and expressed his lifelong dream of becoming a hero like his mother and grandmother. He just wanted a chance. Bakugo's hands began to smoke, and Izumi stood up, her expression filled with contempt. She dismissed Izuku's dreams, predicting he would be forgotten and alone. The laughter continued, and Izuku felt tears welling in his eyes. Izumi returned to her seat, turning away in shame. Hours later, as Izuku packed his belongings, Bakugo, Izumi, and a couple of their friends confronted him. Izumi used her telekinesis to snatch the notebook he had been writing in. She mocked him, questioning if it was yet another hero notebook. Bakugo joined in, taunting Izuku about his futile attempts to retrieve it. Izuku's heart sank as he pleaded for its return, but Bakugo only smirked, knowing he had the upper hand. With a swift motion, Bakugo ignited his hand and burned the notebook right in front of Izuku, leaving him feeling utterly defeated. Izuku pondered why he even bothered trying as Bakugo hurled the charred book out the window. At this point, he felt numb. It was just another day in a series of unfortunate events. The two bullies took turns tormenting him until he found himself on the floor, tears streaming down his face. Bakugo placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, causing sparks to fly and singe his uniform. With a menacing tone, he warned Izuku not to apply for you, stating it was his only warning. As Bakugo and his friends prepared to leave, he added a cruel suggestion, hinting that if Izuku truly wanted to be a hero, he should take a leap off the roof and hope for a heroic quirk in his next life. As the bullies exited, laughter echoing behind them, Izuku rose from the floor, his head bowed, tears still flowing. He felt a mix of anger and despair building within him, but he suppressed it. Leaving the building, he retrieved his notebook from the koi fish pond and walked away from the school grounds, feeling utterly alone. In a different location, a man sat on a throne, connected to various medical devices. Tubes were inserted into his face to supply oxygen to his lungs. The dim light of the room obscured his features, but the soft green glow from the computers illuminated his scarred visage. After his confrontation with All Might, the symbol of peace, he had suffered injuries that his quirk could not heal. Although a doctor friend had found a healing quirk, the damage was irreversible. He had lost his eyes and nose, but his thirst for revenge remained. He scanned the surveillance footage of Mizudafu City, searching for potential successors. After a failed attempt to capture Tenko Shimura, he had grown desperate to find someone who could take his place, as his body could no longer serve as the symbol of evil. His luck changed when he spotted a boy with green hair walking alone. He had been observing the Yagi family for some time, hoping to make All Might watch as he eliminated them one by one. But now, he was intrigued by the boy he saw being bullied at school. The boy was clearly intelligent, as evidenced by his writings and his understanding of quirks. "Well, aren't you intriguing? Izuku Yagi," he mused. Izuku felt a sense of relief that he hadn't written anything too revealing in his new notebook, which was now marred with charred marks. Most of the pages were burnt, stained with ashes. He took a different route. Home to avoid those who despised him, trying to suppress the painful memories. He aspired to be a hero and believed that hatred had no place in that dream. He wondered why Bakugo had said such hurtful things and what would happen if he actually followed through with them. Despite his efforts, he felt unwelcome at home. His family treated him as if he didn't exist, while his sister Izumi was the shining star of the Yagi family. On difficult days like this, he often had to tend to his own wounds from the bullying. If his parents noticed, they would likely believe Izumi's claims that he was just seeking attention. Their attention was always on her, and he faced unjust punishment for things he hadn't done. As Izuku wandered through an underground tunnel, he felt a rumbling beneath his feet. Suddenly, a living mass of sludge erupted from the sewers. The sludge villain exclaimed that he had found himself a meat suit and lunged at the terrified boy. Izuku attempted to escape, but a tendril ensnared him. He struggled to scream as the villain forced the sludge into his mouth, attempting to control him. "Nothing personal, but I just need a disguise to help me skip town. Thanks for being so charitable. You're my hero," the sludge villain declared. Izuku dropped his notebook as his strength waned. He thought this might be the end. He felt sorry for his father and grandmother, believing he had failed them. Just as he began to lose consciousness, something stirred within him, causing the villain to hesitate. "What the hell? the sludge villain muttered as the ground shook. Suddenly, someone burst from the same manhole he had emerged from. "Fear not, for I am here," All Might announced, ready to confront the villain. The sludge villain was taken aback and attempted to flee, but All Might swiftly captured him. With a powerful attack, he sent the villain splattering against the walls, freeing the unconscious boy from within. All Might surveyed the scene and noted the mess. "Well, this should be an easy cleanup. Ha!" He then turned to the civilian he had saved and, upon closer inspection, recognized the familiar green tuft of hair. "Izuku!" he exclaimed, rushing to his son's side, checking for signs of life. "Izuku! Izuku! Answer me!" As he watched, Izuku coughed up sludge and began to breathe again. All Might sighed in relief, grateful that his son was okay. Izuku stirred awake, feeling a gentle hand tapping his cheek. "Wake up! Wake up!" When he opened his eyes, he was met with the iconic smile of his idol, All Might. Overwhelmed with excitement, Izuku shuffled back, trying to maintain a respectful distance. "All Might," he stammered, unable to believe his eyes. "The one and only. Apologies, young Izuku, but I've been chasing that dastardly villain all day. I'm terribly sorry for allowing him to harm you," All Might said, his hearty laughter easing Izuku's anxiety. The boy momentarily forgot that All Might even knew his name. All Might extended his hand to Izuku, who finally snapped out of his shock and prepared to shake it. "It's no problem, All Might. I appreciate you saving me." All Might's smile widened slightly. He reassured the young boy that it was no trouble at all. The boy had done his best to endure, and now he had another chance at life. However, he had to take the villain back to the police. Just as All Might prepared to leave, the boy called out to him, asking if it was possible to become a hero without a quirk. Izuku Yagi was familiar with the feeling of heartbreak. It was something he experienced daily. Today, however, it was more intense than he had ever known. He had asked his idol, the #1 hero, if he could be a hero without a quirk, and the answer was a resounding no. All Might had explained that some villains were too powerful to defeat without abilities of their own, and without a quirk, Izuku's life would be in danger. He had urged Izuku not to worry his family, as if he understood the weight of those words. Tears streamed down Izuku's face as anger and despair churned within him. He trudged home, longing for the solitude of his room where he could scream in safety. Upon arriving at his large family house, he opened the door and was greeted by 2 photographs on the desk near the entrance. He spoke softly to the images of his deceased relatives, expressing his hope that they were doing well while he felt anything but. Today had been particularly difficult, and he felt he could not endure much more. A final tear fell as he moved through the house. In the kitchen, his mother, 𝐒𝐮𝐬, was preparing dinner on her day off. He greeted her, but she was too focused on her task to notice him. When he shared that he had a terrible day and had nearly lost his life, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 abruptly stopped and turned to him, alarmed. She scolded him for joking about such a serious matter, insisting he go to his room. Izuku, intimidated by her reaction, apologized and retreated upstairs, regretting that he had even spoken to her. He wished he hadn't given her the chance to be a caring mother. Entering his room, he noticed the dusty gray walls and the bare wooden floor. It was stifling in the summer and freezing in the winter. He dropped his bag and collapsed onto the mattress, overwhelmed by despair. He cried into his pillow until a hesitant idea formed in his mind. He felt he didn't belong or receive love in this place. Meanwhile, deep within his lair, All for One cackled with glee. He found it amusing that All Might had told his son he couldn't be a hero. The fear on the boy's face had been evident when those words were spoken. A security camera had captured the entire conversation, and All for One pressed a button on his throne. Moments later, a purple misty portal appeared, and a tall man in a bartender uniform emerged, his hands and head shrouded in thick purple fog, a menacing collar around his neck. The man addressed All for One respectfully, inquiring about his call. All for One, with an unsettling smile, instructed the man, 𝐒𝐻𝐬, to retrieve the life support mask the doctor had made for him, as he had something important to see. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 complied, handing over the bulky mask adorned with tubes and a skull design, which added to its intimidating appearance. Curious, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 asked why All for One needed to go out. All for One, pleased with 𝐒𝐮𝐬's curiosity, revealed that he had finally found his successor. Later that day, Tashinori returned home, exhausted from his encounter with the sludge villain and the subsequent wait at the police station. He felt guilty for shattering his son's dreams. He had hoped to ease Izuku into the harsh reality, but the look in his son's eyes had told him otherwise. He realized he needed to have a genuine conversation with Izuku, something he hadn't done in a long time. Perhaps they could go out for ice cream together, but that would have to wait. Today had been a wake-up call for Tashinori. How could he be the symbol of peace if he struggled to chase down a single villain? He needed to find a successor. His body was failing him. He pondered his options, and 4 candidates stood out. Izuku and his sister, Izumi, were obvious choices due to their family ties and ability to keep secrets. Izumi was strong and confident, and her quirk, combined with One for All, could make her the next #1 hero. However, Tashinori noticed the tension between the siblings during family meals, which concerned him. Then there was Izuku. The boy was intelligent, as evidenced by his notebook, but he lacked training. Giving Izuku One for All would be like inviting disaster. Tashinori was determined not to involve either of the twins in the legacy of One for All. He recalled the moment when Nana had to part with her child to ensure his safety. It was a tragic irony that befell Kotaro. He was sent away for protection, only to harbor resentment toward his mother, which ultimately led to his own downfall and that of his family. Tashinori couldn't involve his family in the secret of One for All. Only 𝐒𝐮𝐬 was aware, and she had been increasingly anxious about the possibility of him considering young Izumi. Then there was Tenko Shimura, a strong candidate for One for All. However, Tashinori quickly dismissed that thought. Young Tenko was a deeply scarred and traumatized boy. Living with Gran Torino had helped him regain some trust in others, but Tashinori wouldn't want to bring a child so affected by All for One into the fold. He also considered Tenko's quirk. One for All was a stockpile quirk that could enhance its user's abilities. Nana had demonstrated this when her float quirk combined with One for All, allowing her to practically fly. From what he had heard from Gran, young Tenko was genuinely afraid of his quirk, often wearing gloves. Tashinori could only imagine the chaos that could ensue from an accidental activation of a powered-up decay. That left him with one final option, Night Eye's proposal, Mirio Togata. According to the records he reviewed, the boy was an upbeat, outgoing, and selfless second-year student at U. His quirk, permeation, would synergize well with One for All. There was no doubt he could become the #1 hero, as even Eraserhead had mentioned that Mirio had a strong chance of taking the top spot after All Might retired. Sir Night Eye and Principal Nizu had been advocating for Mirio for some time, and Tashinori felt conflicted. Young Togata seemed like an ideal candidate for One for All, yet he reminded Tashinori of a younger version of himself, complete with that infectious smile. Additionally, he barely knew the boy compared to his other candidates, and he and Night Eye had not seen eye to eye since the incident. He knew he needed to make a decision about a successor soon. Villains had been increasingly active in recent months, signaling that something ominous was on the horizon. As he entered his home, he found Izumi and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 setting the dining table. Izumi was the first to notice him and rushed over to embrace her father, expressing her joy at his return. Tashinori's mood lifted at the sight of her genuine happiness. He shared that his day had been routine, filled with significant work, and asked about her school day. Izumi rolled her eyes, unimpressed by the school talk, and excitedly informed him that she and Kaken had signed up for the U entrance exam. Tashinori felt proud that his daughter was taking her first steps toward becoming a hero. He then approached 𝐒𝐮𝐬, hugged her, and inquired about her day. She mentioned that she had taken a much-needed day off. Tashinori had noticed her increased activity in recent weeks due to stress, and he had encouraged her to take a break after a particularly agitated episode. However, he soon realized that one person was missing from the dining table. He asked where Izuku was, and both Izumi and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 exchanged glances, unsure. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 mentioned that Izuku had gone to his room the last time she saw him. Tashinori found this odd, as Izuku usually helped with setting the table. A sense of unease settled in his gut, prompting him to check on his son. He made his way upstairs and listened at Izuku's door. Silence greeted him, which felt unusual. He knocked and called out to Izuku, but there was no response. Growing increasingly concerned, he knocked again, only to be met with more silence. Determined, he opened the door, and a cold breeze rushed past him. Inside, he gasped at the sight. The room was empty, looking as if it had been ransacked, and the window stood wide open. Meanwhile, Izuku navigated through the alleys, careful not to be seen. He wore a forest green hoodie, black sweatpants, and his signature red shoes. His yellow backpack, stuffed with notebooks, also contained water bottles and rations he had prepared in case his parents forgot to feed him or went on vacation without him. He estimated he had enough supplies to last about a month, hoping to find a place away from the Yagis and perhaps secure a part-time job. His dreams felt shattered, and his heart burned with a mix of rage and sadness. He needed to discover his purpose in a society that felt worthless to him, and he couldn't do that within what he perceived as a suffocating family environment. As he turned a corner in the alley, a voice interrupted his thoughts. A man stood nearby, wearing a sleeveless black shirt, leather jeans, and boots. He was muscular, with metal shards protruding from his skin, particularly on his forearms and face. The man had a military-style haircut and a small scar above his right eye, accompanied by a mischievous grin. He approached Izuku, commenting on the late hour for a child like him to be out. Panic surged within Izuku, prompting him to flee, but the man was quicker, grabbing the hood of Izuku's sweatshirt and pulling him back. The man insisted he only wanted to talk, but there was a menacing undertone in his voice. Izuku struggled, pleading for the man to let him go, but the man grinned wider as his forearm transformed, encasing itself in a hard shell. He then struck Izuku in the gut, causing him to gasp in pain before being thrown to the ground. The man leaned in, outlining what was about to happen next. The man threatened the boy with a harsh tone, demanding his money. Izuku, curled up in a ball and overwhelmed with pain, stammered that he had nothing. The man, furious, lifted Izuku by his shirt collar and slammed him against the alley wall, delivering blow after blow with a gauntlet-covered fist. Blood mixed with tears streamed down Izuku's face as he struggled to remain conscious, desperately kicking and squirming, but it seemed hopeless. He felt as though he was on the brink of losing everything in that dark alley. Just as the man prepared to strike again, a chilling voice echoed from the alley entrance. Another man appeared, dressed in a sharp suit and wearing a black mask adorned with tubes and a skull design. He spoke with an unsettling calmness, warning the thug to release the boy if he wished to leave alive. The thug, enraged, dropped the barely conscious Izuku and charged at the masked man. However, the masked figure remained still, effortlessly catching the thug's punch. The thug's shock was palpable as he attempted to pull back his arm, but the masked man held firm. With a playful tone, he remarked on the thug's quirk, expressing a longing to add it to his collection. Suddenly, red lightning surged from his hand, causing the thug to scream in agony as if his very essence was being seized. The gauntlet vanished from the thug's arm, along with the metal protrusions from his body. In disbelief, the thug shouted in confusion. The masked man remained silent, raising his other arm and unleashing a powerful gust of wind that sent the thug crashing against the wall of the alley. When the dust settled, only a blood-stained impact area remained. The masked man then approached Izuku, who was barely propped up and drifting in and out of consciousness. Lowering himself to meet the boy's gaze, he spoke in a calm yet unsettling manner, acknowledging that he had arrived just in time to save him. Izuku struggled to speak, blood still in his mouth, and managed to ask who the man was. The masked figure advised Izuku to conserve his strength and revealed that he had been watching him for some time. He spoke of a society that favored the strong and left the weak behind, but he saw potential in Izuku, potential waiting to be unleashed. Izuku, confused and feeling worthless, protested that he was quirkless and questioned why the man would see anything in him. The masked man acknowledged Izuku's quirklessness but offered to help him. He extended his hand, promising to grant him the power to prove everyone wrong and show society his true worth. Izuku was torn. The man had just eliminated a threat, yet he was clearly dangerous. He had always dreamed of being a hero, but everyone had told him it was unrealistic. In that moment, anger and despair welled up inside him, and he took the man's hand. Meanwhile, the police arrived in response to the sounds of conflict in the alley. They found BLD scattered throughout the area, particularly in the spot where the thug had impacted the wall. One officer discovered a charred piece of paper near the alley wall, which turned out to be a signature of 𝐒𝐻𝐬. Hours earlier, Izumi returned home after a fun day at the arcade with 𝐒𝐿. Her mother greeted her and asked about her day. Izumi cheerfully recounted her adventures. As she headed upstairs, she heard noise coming from the bathroom. When the door opened, she found Izuku emerging, clutching a toothbrush and other toiletries. His face was a sight to behold, marked by tear stains and puffy eyes, radiating a barely contained fury. Izumi questioned his unusual behavior, but he merely turned to his room without answering. Before closing the door, he asked why she hated him, expressing his confusion and pain. Izumi's expression shifted to one of disgust as she coldly replied that he was a disgrace to the family because he was born. Izuku did not cry. He had expected such a response from his sister. Her words confirmed a harsh truth in his mind. He barely glanced at her, but in that moment, she saw the rage in his eyes, burning like flames. He turned and entered his room, slamming the door shut behind him. After that, she heard nothing from him. She only learned what had transpired later. That night, Detective Tsukachi found himself at a loss. For the first time in his career, he despised working on a case. They had received a call from a civilian reporting a fight in Mizudafu, accompanied by screams and an explosion. A hero and police were dispatched to investigate the scene, and what they discovered was horrifying. The alleyway was stained with BLD, indicating a fierce struggle. A massive hole in the wall, also smeared with BLD, confirmed the violence that had occurred. However, the DNA analysis struck Tsukachi deeply. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 𝐃𝐞𝐭𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐬, a man in his 30s, had been found at the scene, or rather, what remained of him. The BLD in the crater confirmed his identity. The specialists on site indicated that an extraordinary amount of force had been required to reduce a person to such a state, especially given that his quirk created a hardened shell around his body, strong enough to deflect bullets. While that was alarming enough, Tsukachi was even more troubled by the other BLD found on the opposite wall. Izuku Yagi, the stepson of the #1 hero, 𝐒𝐻𝐬, was missing. Just hours earlier, Tashinori had contacted him, reporting that Izuku's room was in disarray. Tsukachi had quickly initiated a missing persons case, hoping to locate the boy soon. However, the new developments had severely dampened his spirits. Thankfully, the boy's body was not present, but the evidence suggested he had suffered serious injuries. There was enough BLD to indicate that he could be at risk of BLD loss if not found soon. Tsukachi prayed that the boy was still alive and not fading away in some back alley. This raised a troubling question. Who had assisted Izuku? There were no leads pointing to anyone who might have helped him. The only certainty was the terrifying power involved. Tsukachi was genuinely concerned for the boy's safety, especially since Izuku was quirkless and defenseless. Tsukachi hoped they could find the boy quickly. As he glanced to his right, he noticed a burnt notebook page sealed in a plastic bag for evidence, bearing 𝐒𝐻𝐬's signature. He needed to call Tashinori and update him on the situation, a call he dreaded making. He could only hope it wasn't too late to save the young boy. In the lab, all for one was filled with excitement. He had just taken 𝐒𝐻𝐬's son under his wing. The boy was currently with the doctor, receiving treatment to ensure he didn't perish before he could begin his training. Izuku would be an excellent successor to his plans. The boy's rage and hatred, combined with his keen intellect for analyzing quirks, would aid him in becoming the new symbol of fear. The notebooks found in the boy's bag confirmed this potential. All for one had perused the contents of those notebooks. Despite his lack of sight, he utilized his sensory quirks, acquired over the years, to read them. The details within were impressive, covering not only heroes' quirks but also villains and bystanders. The support gear that could help exceed limits and unique applications were all noted. This demonstrated the boy's intelligence beneath the surface, something all for one intended to cultivate. He would also need the doctor's assistance. Training was essential. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 would ensure that immediately. The boy needed to be physically prepared before receiving a quirk. Additionally, 𝐼 aimed to teach him about the underworld as soon as possible. Having ruled the underworld for so long, he could provide valuable insights to help Izuku persuade others to join his cause. 𝐼 envisioned nurturing the boy's rage and directing it toward All Might. He could already picture the horrified expression on All Might's face when the truth of Izuku's origins was revealed. He would need a new name to remain under the radar, but he couldn't think of one just yet. Perhaps once the child acquired his quirk, he would settle on a fitting name. For now, Izuku would keep his first name, with Shigaraki as his new family name. Suddenly, the monitor on his right glowed purple, indicating the doctor was calling. The doctor addressed him, 𝐼𝐚𝐬. 𝐼 turned his attention to one of his most loyal servants. He inquired about the boy's condition, hoping it hadn't been too taxing for the doctor. "It was not a problem, my lord. The boy is currently stable. Unfortunately, he will have a scar across his face due to the severe beating he endured," the doctor reported, hoping to avoid upsetting his MSTR. "Scars build character, my friend." "I should know," 𝐼 replied, gesturing to his own disfigured features from his battle against the symbol of peace. "But you wouldn't call me so suddenly if there wasn't something noteworthy." "Well, my lord, your successor has some intriguing results regarding his DNA. I checked his vitals and took a BLD sample. He is indeed quirkless, but what fascinates me is the change in his DNA structure," the doctor explained, his voice filled with excitement. "Explain, doctor," 𝐼 commanded, eager to hear more. "Of course, Mr. The boy's body appears to be adapting to various stimuli without a quirk. It seems his body and mind are evolving faster than the average human. My theory of quirk evolution may be coming to fruition if this quirkless child can truly gain such phenomena without the core ingredient of a quirk factor. It's essentially etched into his DNA. He could become stronger, faster, and smarter than the average person with a solid plan. Given what you've said about his intelligence, he might already possess college-level intellect. It's remarkable. I must study this further." "Calm yourself, doctor. You can conduct your tests with the samples you obtained. I need him in peak condition. This revelation may expedite the boy's growth," 𝐼 declared. He was equally fascinated by the discovery. He might just be able to grant the boy a quirk sooner than anticipated. He relished the thought of his plan coming together. The boy would become his ultimate triumph over hero society once and for all. This marks the conclusion of the prologue as the story transitions into the main narrative. Although this chapter is shorter than the others, it serves to set the stage for what is to come. With many ideas swirling in the author's mind, the writing process may take longer due to final season, but a consistent release of at least one part per week is anticipated. Chapter 5. A new purpose. 2 weeks had passed, and Izuku found himself deep in thought. Since waking up, he had reflected on how everything had led him to this moment. He had been taken in by Sensei, who provided him with a place to stay, a quaint bar in Kamino called Dead Man's Drink. It was not extravagant, featuring simple booths along the walls and warm lighting that cast a golden glow throughout the space. The atmosphere felt cozy and inviting. His room was located at the back of the bar, accessible via a stairway. It contained the usual amenities: a bed, blanket, pillows, a desk with fresh clothes, and a new laptop. Though modest, it offered a sense of comfort that was a stark contrast to his old home. His old bag and notebooks rested on the desk, reminding him of his past. 𝐒𝐮𝐬, the bartender, had been assigned as his guide, someone to assist him whenever needed. Despite his intimidating appearance, with yellow eyes piercing through a purple mist, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 was polite and welcoming to the young boy upon his arrival. Izuku quickly grew to respect 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and even viewed him as a mentor, especially after experiencing the excitement of 𝐒𝐮𝐬's warp gate quirk for the first time. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 appreciated Izuku's youthful energy, which brought a spark to their interactions. Once settled in, Izuku was moved into training. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 taught him hand-to-hand combat and emphasized the importance of physical fitness. If Izuku was to navigate a different side of the law, he needed to learn how to defend himself. Stealth training was also crucial. Izuku learned when to remain silent, how to blend into crowds, and the best tactics for surprise attacks. These lessons came easily to him, as he had spent much of his life evading bullies. Training sessions took place in an old warehouse in a deserted area of Kamino. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 proved to be an excellent combat instructor, teaching Izuku through rigorous practice. During the initial weeks, Izuku struggled to land a single hit on 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who refrained from using his quirk. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 interrupted Izuku's thoughts one day, pointing out that he was distracted. A swift kick sent Izuku spiraling away from his opponent. Quickly recovering, he blocked an incoming punch with his left forearm and attempted to close the distance, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 anticipated the move and evaded the jab. Izuku stepped back, contemplating a new strategy. Their training sessions often consisted of this back-and-forth dynamic. Izuku was improving rapidly, adapting new tactics on the fly, though he had yet to successfully strike 𝐒𝐮𝐬. He understood the challenge. He was a novice while 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had years of experience. Once their training session concluded for the day, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 approached Izuku with a fresh towel. He praised Izuku's progress, noting that he had been moving more fluidly than before. However, he reminded Izuku to keep his thoughts focused during training. Izuku's face flushed, aware that some of his inner musings might have slipped out. Apologizing, Izuku acknowledged his struggle to overcome old habits, particularly his tendency to stutter. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 chuckled, remarking that old habits die hard, which elicited a shared laugh between them. Checking his watch, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 urged Izuku to leave, reminding him not to be late. Realizing it was past noon, Izuku quickly changed into fresh clothes, grabbed his latest notebook, and requested 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to open a portal to Sensei. Before stepping through, he glanced at the cover of his notebook, which read Quirk Notes for Sensei. Upon exiting the warp gate, Izuku found himself in a dimly lit room, nearly engulfed in darkness, save for a green glow emanating from the far end of the corridor. There, All for One sat on his throne, illuminated by the eerie light of the surrounding machinery. He greeted Izuku with a polite inquiry about his training with 𝐒𝐮𝐬, already knowing the answer but eager to hear it from his new protege. Izuku expressed his progress, though he felt disheartened by his inability to land a blow on 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Sensei reassured him, reminding him that great things take time. He then inquired if Izuku had brought the information he sought. Izuku lifted his hand, presenting the notebook for Sensei to take. Using his telekinesis, Sensei effortlessly lifted the book from Izuku's grasp. Izuku flinched slightly, recalling memories of his sister, but he maintained his composure, knowing it would be impolite to show any discomfort. Sensei had assigned Izuku various tasks to enhance his intelligence and note-taking skills. He sent Izuku to specific locations in Japan to gather information about individuals with particular quirks, documenting their strengths, weaknesses, and relevant details. Most of the subjects were criminals, back-alley dealers, or low-ranking heroes who could easily be overlooked. Today, Izuku's mission was to provide Sensei with all the information he had collected about a notorious criminal named Itoro Kajisuchi, who had numerous charges, including attempted murder and first-degree murder. His quirk, Impure Beam, was an excellent complement to All for One's growing collection of abilities, thanks to Izuku's assistance. Sensei took the time to explain the workings of the underworld to Izuku, ensuring the boy understood the basics. He emphasized the importance of never turning one's back when planning a counterattack and using clever wordplay to influence those less intelligent. He also discussed the roles of informants and brokers, who served as the backbone of the underworld, trading information for the right price. Izuku absorbed all the knowledge his sensei shared, truly valuing every word. After all, he was the only one who had genuinely supported him in his time of need, so it was only right to listen and take his lessons to heart. All for One had grown accustomed to Izuku's analytical skills. They played chess together, with All for One aiming to check the king while losing as few pieces as possible. This was a way to challenge Izuku's mind and encourage him to devise future strategies. However, All for One was not genuinely competing to win. He was a master at chess, while Izuku was still a novice. This exercise was meant to assess Izuku's ability to create complex maneuvers. Although the boy was intelligent, certain aspects held him back from reaching his full potential. Initially, Izuku struggled to devise strategies that would allow him to counter All for One without causing harm, even when there were clear paths to victory that involved sacrificing pieces. All for One attributed this to Izuku's selfless nature, reminiscent of Yoichi. They were strikingly similar in many ways. After finishing his detailed notes, All for One handed the notebook back to Izuku and remarked on his progress, noting that he was exceeding all expectations. This praise brought a wide smile to Izuku's face, as he had longed for such acknowledgement. Izuku expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that he could not have achieved this without his sensei's guidance. All for One, however, humbly insisted that the focus was on Izuku's growth, aiming to help him become something greater than the quirkless boy he once was. He was determined to assist Izuku in surpassing All Might and even his sister. All for One knew this would stir feelings of resentment within Izuku. As the boy's gaze dropped to the floor, his expression shifting from joy to a more serious demeanor. All for One had been carefully nurturing the boy's animosity since his awakening. It had been challenging at first, as Izuku was adept at concealing his emotions, even from himself. He possessed the same level of innocence as his younger brother. However, All for One had learned from his past mistakes with Yoichi and was gradually chipping away at Izuku's heart. It began subtly, encouraging the boy to despise his most prominent bullies, including his former best friend and sister. Then he directed Izuku's anger toward the other children who mocked him and the teachers who perpetuated the cycle of cruelty. Finally, he turned Izuku's ire toward random individuals on the street who either pitied him or regarded him as insignificant. All for One needed to stoke the flames of Izuku's destructive emotions. He contemplated revealing the harsh realities of hero society to the boy, which would further ignite his hatred. Only then could he unveil the truth about All Might being his father, who had abandoned him. He envisioned the eruption of rage that would follow, a spectacle he anticipated with delight. But he knew he had time before Izuku was ready. When that moment came, all would fear him. After Izuku composed himself, All for One sent him back to eat. He needed to strategize the next steps for the boy in the coming months. If Izuku was to be his successor, he needed to learn what it truly meant to be a villain. All for One began planning specific tests for the boy, knowing that only then could he truly earn his name and quirk. A few days later, Izuku was walking through the alleys of Fukuoka in Kyushu, dressed in his usual attire, a slightly torn forest green hoodie, matching gloves, black combat breathes, and his signature red sneakers. He carried his notebook, diligently writing notes. The newest addition to his outfit was a black respirator, a gift from Sensei in recognition of his recent progress. The respirator was designed to resemble teeth, intended to intimidate others, and featured a voice modifier to conceal his identity. As he finished documenting his analysis of a criminal known as Pinch, whose quirk, Pocket, allowed him to create a small pocket dimension within his clothing, Izuku noted how the man could store an unlimited number of items as long as they physically fit. Pinch had been seen around the city, pickpocketing unsuspecting victims and hiding his loot within his quirk. He could even carry weapons undetected through metal detectors in places like train stations and banks. While completing his notes, Izuku heard a squelching sound coming from around the corner. Concerned about a potential attack from a thug like before, he felt a mix of caution and curiosity. Driven by his inquisitive nature, he stealthily approached the wall to peek around the corner, only to be met with a sight that made his stomach churn. A girl about his age, with messy blonde hair tied in 2 buns, crouched over a lifeless body. She wore a yellow cardigan and a blue skirt, resembling a uniform from another school. Her eyes were cat-like, with pinprick irises, and she held a bloodied box cutter in one hand while using a straw to extract something from the injured individual before her. She felt her cheeks flush as she drank from the unfortunate victim. Izuku was horrified by the scene and was about to turn away when her gaze caught him from the corner of her eye. She stopped and stood up to face him, introducing herself with excitement. She exclaimed how cute he was, showcasing her sharp fangs with a wide grin. Izuku stammered a response, but she interrupted him, suggesting he would look even cuter if he were injured. As she lunged toward him, Izuku thought about how this was the third time he had to fight for his life this month. He dodged the incoming move from Toga's knife, swerving to the side as she rushed past him. She quickly twisted her body to face him, swinging her weapon in a wide arc. Izuku backpedaled, evading her swipes and moves. Despite his efforts, she was agile, managing to evade many of his punches and kicks with ease. He realized he was becoming more fatigued than she was and urged himself to think of a strategy. Just then, Toga's knife grazed his cheek, drawing a small amount of blood. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she noticed the cut, and she continued her relentless assault while Izuku skillfully dodged. He recognized that her movements were erratic and uncontrolled, which gave him an opportunity. Seizing the moment, he charged at her, catching Toga off guard. He struck her hand, causing her to drop the knife, and quickly flipped her around, pinning her to the ground. She cooed playfully, and Izuku felt his face heat up. Taking advantage of his momentary distraction, she kicked his leg out from under him, flipping their positions so that she pinned him down, gazing at him with an intense hunger, particularly focused on the cut on his cheek. Both were breathing from exhaustion as they locked eyes. Izuku, now able to think clearly, noticed a predatory glint in her cat-like eyes, but he also sensed something unexpected: fear. He recalled how he had found her earlier, drinking blood from a lifeless body, and realized it must be related to her quirk. Gathering his courage, he spoke up, stuttering as he addressed her need for blood. Toga's expression shifted from surprise to a more intense gaze, questioning how he knew about her condition. He quickly clarified that he wasn't affiliated with heroes and was merely observant. Her demeanor softened slightly, though skepticism lingered. She admitted her need for blood due to her quirk and asked if he had a problem with it. He assured her he wasn't judging her, and she seemed taken aback by his understanding. He shared that he could relate to her feelings of being judged based on one's quirk. As he spoke, her grip on him loosened, and she slowly got off him, her mind seemingly elsewhere. He expressed his own feelings of loneliness, revealing that he had often felt isolated throughout his life. In that moment, tears began to stream down Toga's face, catching Izuku by surprise. He hadn't intended to make her cry and was about to apologize when she asked why he was relating to her. Izuku contemplated this, recognizing that he was meant to be a villain but had experienced kindness from others, which made him question the black and white view of the world. He explained that she looked like she needed help, reaching into his backpack to retrieve a syringe filled with his own blood. He had learned some medical skills and, despite lacking formal training, felt confident in what he was doing. He offered her the syringe, explaining that he wanted to help her. Toga's eyes widened in disbelief as she processed his gesture, feeling as though a knight had come to rescue her. When she hesitated, he reassured her that he wanted to do this. As she accepted the syringe and drank its contents, a genuine smile spread across her face for the first time since they had met. Her cheeks flushed as she embraced the young boy, leaving him startled by the unexpected affection. She expressed her gratitude repeatedly before pausing, a hint of embarrassment crossing her face as she realized she didn't know his name. He awkwardly apologized, explaining that it hadn't come up during their earlier conversation. They both stood up from the floor, and he introduced himself as Izuku Shigaraki. She responded with her name, Himiko Toga, though he already knew it. In that moment, a bond formed between two lost souls. Weeks passed, and after a rigorous training session with 𝐒𝐼𝐬, Izuku decided it was time to wear civilian clothes for a day out with Toga. Following their earlier encounter, they had exchanged numbers and agreed to meet occasionally. Today, they were heading to the mall. Izuku opted for a black hoodie gifted by Sensei, paired with sweatpants and red shoes. He considered changing his hairstyle but decided against it, knowing that most heroes wouldn't recognize him. His unremarkable appearance, including a scar, allowed him to blend in easily. As he walked past the bar counter, he informed 𝐒𝐼𝐬 of his plans. 𝐒𝐼𝐬 acknowledged him with a watchful eye, reminding him to be cautious as he left. Izuku smiled in response. 𝐒𝐼𝐬 noticed the television was on, the purple glow indicating that Sensei was listening in, as usual. He inquired about Izuku's new friend, waiting for a response from the screen. After a moment, all for one replied, expressing approval of the friendship. He believed it provided Izuku with a fresh perspective on villainy and could strengthen his resolve against hero society. He noted that Toga could be a valuable asset for their future plans. Meanwhile, Toga and Izuku strolled through the mall, enjoying ice cream from a local vendor while sharing stories about their pasts. Izuku learned about Toga's quirk, which allowed her to transform into anyone after ingesting their BLD. This revelation had initially left him muttering in surprise, which amused Toga. She appreciated his quirky nature, something he found refreshing since few had ever liked that part of him. Their conversation turned deeper as Toga shared her experiences with her abusive parents, and Izuku felt a connection, recognizing their shared struggles with unloving families. Then, unexpectedly, Toga asked if he had ever killed anyone. The question caught him off guard, especially in a public space, though they had found a quieter corner of the mall. He stammered in response, surprised by her bluntness. She explained that if he was serious about becoming a villain, he would eventually have to confront the reality of death. Izuku looked down, grappling with the unsettling thought. Toga reassured him that he didn't have to harm innocents, only those he despised. As she spoke, he reflected on his own family and the growing resentment he felt towards them. Toga noticed the change in his expression, sensing the anger that was unusual for him. After a moment of contemplation, he asked her how one goes about killing. He acknowledged that it was a lesson he would need to learn eventually but doubted his strength to confront those who had wronged him. Toga suggested starting with someone less significant, someone he could target without drawing too much attention. She offered her assistance if he wanted it. As they continued their conversation, Izuku considered his options. He ruled out his classmates and Bakugo, realizing they would be too difficult to confront. However, he remembered a particular figure from Aldera who had always sided against him and his sister. That man had been a source of frustration for years, and perhaps now was the right time to seek retribution. Later that evening, Principal 𝐼𝐼𝐬 was busy with paperwork, compiling exam scores for the third years. His focus was primarily on the top students, Katsuki Bakugo and Izumi Yagi, both of whom had promising futures at U. However, he worried about Izumi's mental state following her brother's disappearance. Though her grades had dipped initially, they were improving, which he viewed positively. He understood the impact of losing a family member, especially a sibling, and noted her resilience. As he organized his desk, his gaze fell on the cover of a book titled The Meta-Liberation War. He reflected on the philosophy that strong quirks were essential for human evolution, leaving the weak behind. It was a belief he had been instilling in the young minds around him, shaping them into unknowing soldiers for a future he envisioned. Distraught had allowed him to take control of the school to influence the young minds of today and bring about liberation tomorrow. Izuku and Toga stood outside the school, with Izuku dressed in his villain costume. They were near the breaker box on the building's exterior. Izuku recalled Sensei's lesson: to instill fear, one must first strip away safety. He did just that by cutting the power to the building. With bolt cutters from his backpack, he severed the lights and camera feed, ensuring no one would know it was them. They exchanged nods and took the nearest entrance, slipping through a window. Inside, Principal 𝐼𝐼𝐬 jumped when the power went out. Frantically, he grabbed his flashlight from the cabinet and turned it on. After a moment, he calmed himself, thinking the janitor must have turned off the power for the night without checking if anyone was inside. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of glass shattering outside his office, causing his nerves to spike. He attempted to use his phone, but the internet was down. Carefully, he retrieved his old revolver from his desk and opened the door slowly, peering out for any threats. Seeing nothing, he opened the door fully and cautiously made his way down the hallway. As he descended the stairs, he felt as if he were in a horror movie, anticipating a monster's attack. All he needed to do was reach the generator room to restore power. However, upon reaching the bottom of the stairs, he noticed a broken window, heightening his fear. He aimed his gun around, ready for anything that might emerge from the shadows. When he finally reached the generator room, he opened the door, quickly closing and locking it behind him. It felt like the safest place to be. Confusion washed over him as he realized the generator was already running. The lights flickered on, revealing Izuku blocking the door. Before the principal could react, Toga swiftly incapacitated him, her laughter echoing in the confined space. As the principal fell to the floor, Izuku picked up the dropped gun, examining it before pocketing it for later use. Toga gleefully held the principal down, her excitement palpable. The principal's eyes widened in realization, recognizing Izuku Yagi. Panic surged within him as he questioned how Izuku was alive and present. Izuku approached slowly, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. He had never taken a life before, but deep down he knew they were too far gone to turn back. A small part of him craved this moment. The principal pleaded for mercy, expressing his regret, but his words were cut short as Izuku brandished a hunting knife. The principal's eyes filled with tears as he realized his fate. Izuku felt an overwhelming rush, adrenaline coursing through him as he recalled the times he had been bullied and mistreated. Memories of his father's concern and the principal's dismissive attitude flooded back, igniting a fire within him. Toga's hand on his shoulder brought him back to the present. She looked at him with a mix of surprise and excitement, urging him on. However, when he glanced back at the principal, he was met with a gruesome sight that made him feel sick. His gloves and hoodie were stained, and the knife still bore remnants of the act. Overwhelmed, Izuku felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Toga, sensing his distress, encouraged him to leave before they were discovered. They escaped through the window and ran through the alleyways, ensuring they wouldn't be caught. Once they reached a safe spot, Toga excitedly praised him for his actions, her enthusiasm contrasting sharply with Izuku's turmoil. He was now a villain, having crossed a line he could never uncross. The reality of what he had done settled heavily upon him, and he felt a wave of sickness rise. Unable to contain himself, he vomited into the nearest trash bin, with Toga offering comfort as she patted his back. He would need to adapt to this new reality, but it was just the beginning. The following morning, Detective Tsukachi arrived at the school. The entire 𝐒𝐬 school district was on lockdown as police and nearby heroes responded to the situation. A janitor had called in early, reporting the cut breaker box and low power in the building. After failing to reach the principal, he attempted to turn on the generator, only to discover the grim truth too late. Principal 𝐒𝐬𝐽 was found in the generator room, his body marked by multiple wounds, a chilling testament to the events that had unfolded. The school was promptly closed, and the police began their investigation. Tsukachi surveyed the scene, noting how meticulous the perpetrator had been in covering their tracks. The main power was cut, preventing access to the camera system, as the generator only powered the lights. A broken window offered little insight, as it had been shattered from the outside by a rock that now lay on the floor inside. Attempts to find fingerprints on the body or the weapon yielded no results, suggesting the killer had either worn gloves or that the BLD had washed them away. The weapon used in the attack was identifiable as a knife, a common tool that was easy to wield. The nature of the wounds indicated a hunting knife, known for its serrated edge. Finding the killer would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. More information was desperately needed. Tsukachi took a sip of his coffee when his phone rang. The caller ID displayed Toshinori's name. Tsukachi answered, and 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐬's voice came through, asking if there was any progress in finding the killer. Tsukachi replied that the assailant had been very careful, leaving no DNA evidence behind, only the body. He had already spoken with the janitor, who provided a positive account of the events. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐬 expressed his concern, insisting that there had to be something they could uncover. Tsukachi inquired about Izumi, and 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐬 shared that she was improving, though it had been a difficult month. Her brother's disappearance weighed heavily on her, and she had been spending time with Bakugo, seeking some fresh air away from home. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐬 sighed, feeling distressed about his daughter's situation. He then asked about the search for Izuku. Tsukachi acknowledged the question, admitting that there were no leads at the moment. They were still searching for any trace of him or his kidnapper, and he expressed his regrets to 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐬. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐬 took responsibility for the situation, feeling he had failed as both a father and a hero. He vowed to learn from his mistakes and urged Tsukachi to find Izuku. Tsukachi understood the urgency and shared his frustrations about the circumstances, but he respected 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐬's intentions. He hoped that Izuku was still alive to hear his father's words. 2 months later, night enveloped Tokyo, and the scene shifted to a warehouse in the northern part of the city. A white truck arrived, allowing gang members to park and unload supplies. One of the men approached the leader of the Eastern Dragon Gang, 𝐒𝐬, to confirm that everything was in order. Kabuto inspected the boxes, finding vials of a purple substance, and smiled, instructing his men to store the shipments in the back for an early morning buyer. As the gang members complied, an unsettling presence filled the entrance of the warehouse. A dark mist began to swirl, and 2 figures emerged from the shadows. Izuku Shigaraki stepped out of 𝐒𝐬𝐬's portal, clad in a modified villain costume. His green hoodie had been reinforced for protection, featuring a combat vest sewn into it. The hoodie bore cuts and rips, enhancing its intimidating appearance. With a cowl that obscured his face except for his glowing green eyes, and a jaw-like respirator mask, he looked fearsome. He wore a red combat belt, black briefs with added armor, and red shoes equipped for maximum impact. His gloves were reinforced, and he carried a black combat knife and a silver revolver. Beside him stood a hulking creature, a monstrous figure with blackened skin and bulging muscles. It wore simple briefs adorned with skull emblems, and its head was unsettling, featuring a yellow beak and exposed brain. As the mist dissipated, 2 glowing yellow eyes appeared, creating an imposing presence behind them. Izuku approached the frightened gang members, introducing themselves as the League of Villains. He explained that they had come at an inopportune time, as the gang had something that belonged to them, a shipment of trigger that had been stolen. He requested the return of their property to avoid conflict. The gang members initially laughed at the audacity of the young villain, mocking him for thinking they could simply take back what was theirs. Kabuto, still chuckling, questioned what Izuku planned to do. Izuku calmly replied that he wouldn't be the one to act. His companion, Nomu, would handle it. With a snap of his fingers, Nomu vanished from his side, and a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. The gang turned to witness a horrifying sight. One of their members lay lifeless on the floor, Nomu's fist stained with blood fear spread among the Eastern Dragons, while a few remained enraged by the sudden attack. One of the combatants was a hippo heteromorph who charged at Nomu with determination. He declared that Nomu would pay for his actions as he swung a punch aimed directly at Nomu's face. To his surprise, Nomu remained completely unfazed. In response, Nomu swatted the hippo man aside, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. Despite the impact, the hippo man, thanks to the resilience granted by his quirk, managed to rise to his feet. The 2 engaged in a fierce struggle, charging at one another, but Nomu's superior strength quickly pushed the hippo man to the far end of the warehouse, where their brawl continued, drawing in several other gang members. Meanwhile, other gang members advanced toward Izuku and 𝐒𝐬𝐬. Kabuto activated his quirk, transforming his arm into a metallic claw. He prepared to unleash a powerful water beam, recalling the information Sensei had shared about the gang. Izuku commanded 𝐒𝐬𝐬 to scatter, and 𝐒𝐬𝐬 complied, expanding his dark clouds to envelop many of the gang members, including Kabuto, dispersing them throughout the maze-like warehouse. As 𝐒𝐬𝐬 and Izuku faced off against the majority of the gang, 𝐒𝐬𝐬 spoke through the mist, apologizing for the chaos, explaining that when the MSTR desired something, it would be obtained. He then opened another portal, allowing a new silhouette to emerge. This figure had an exposed brain like Nomu, but unlike him, it was smaller and had pale white skin. It was less muscular but still formidable, with a film camera for a head and glowing crimson lens. The creature and Izuku charged at the remaining gang members, ready for battle. 2 gang members, who had been driving a cargo truck, found themselves hiding behind some boxes, their hearts racing as they witnessed the chaos around them. They were terrified, realizing this was not what they had signed up for. They heard a scream nearby and realized they were being picked off one by one. One of them, Kenji, panicked, exclaiming that the situation was insane. Toro, attempting to keep his composure, urged Kenji to regain his focus and find a way out. Just then, a voice called out to them, and they saw Janjo waving. The 2 men rushed over, but in a shocking twist, a knife appeared in Janjo's hand as he swiftly attacked Kenji. Tora was taken aback, and before he could react, he turned to see Janjo's lifeless body, revealing Toga beneath the disguise. With a mischievous smile, she expressed her intent to make Toro cuter as well. As he tried to escape, Toga pounced on him, covering his mouth and silencing his cries with a sinister giggle. Kabuto and his men found themselves on the other side of the warehouse, furious that a young hero was wreaking havoc on their operations. As he plotted revenge, a long tongue snatched one of his men, dragging him into the shadows. The gang watched in horror as another Nomu emerged, its brain exposed and its face resembling a skull. It was lanky with long arms and sharp claws. The Nomu opened its mouth wide, launching its tongue to capture another man, swiftly ending his life. Kabuto readied his cannon, rallying his men to fight back against the creature. They charged forward, but the Nomu retaliated, grabbing one of the men and crushing his head. Kabuto fired his cannon, hitting the Nomu directly, but his triumph was short-lived as the creature crawled back into the light, attacking with ferocity. Realizing the danger, Kabuto seized the opportunity to flee, leaving his men to face the monstrous threat. Meanwhile, 𝐒𝐮𝐬, Izuku, and the Lens Nomu continued their fight at the main entrance, working in tandem. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 used his portals to redirect attacks, while the Lens Nomu showcased its strength, targeting enemies with precision and unleashing devastating laser blasts. Izuku recognized the Nomu's potential for long-range combat and devised a plan, pointing out a high vantage point. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 opened a portal for the Nomu, allowing it to gain a strategic advantage. From its new position, the Lens Nomu unleashed a barrage of laser blasts, decimating the gang members. Izuku, amidst the chaos, fought fiercely, using his combat knife to incapacitate enemies swiftly, ensuring they fell with fatal strikes. He had only 6 shots in his revolver, and he needed to make them count. As he fought, he narrowly dodged a bullet aimed at his head. He glanced at the goon with a rifle in hand. Another blast erupted from a man hidden among the shelves, sending a surge of electricity in his direction. Izuku dashed for cover, ducking beneath fiery WHPs and hiding behind one of the many storage containers scattered throughout the area. Bullets, lightning, and fire chipped away at his shelter. Thinking quickly, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 appeared from behind, expressing concern for Izuku's safety. He asked if Izuku was all right, noting how close he had come to danger. Izuku assured him he was fine and explained his plan to deal with their attackers. Just as the rifleman aimed another shot at his last hiding spot, a black portal opened behind him and a bullet shot out, striking the man in the back of the head. He collapsed instantly. Another portal opened behind the electricity user, and he too was hit, the force of the impact sending him staggering back. The fire WHP user, witnessing the chaos, dodged the last bullet aimed at him, only to be caught off guard by Toga, who had arrived on the scene. With a determined expression, she declared that no one could harm her Izuku. A swift slice ended the man's threat. She then charged into the fray, cutting and slicing as beams of energy rained down around them. Izuku and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 emerged from their hiding spot, only to find themselves face-to-face with a man sporting metal knuckles. Izuku recognized him as Tetsugami, a foe with steel bones, and felt a thrill at the challenge. He instructed 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to assist Toga and the Nomu while he took on this opponent. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 hesitated but nodded, teleporting to aid his allies. Izuku squared off against Tetsugami, who taunted him about his apparent death wish. He boasted that Izuku's weapons would be ineffective against him. Izuku smiled beneath his mask, his green eyes glowing with determination. He acknowledged that nothing in this world was easy but stated that he needed the challenge to achieve his goals. Tetsugami, angered, charged at him, and Izuku prepared to counterattack. Meanwhile, the Black Nomu continued its relentless assault on Hippo, slamming a dark fist into the man's abdomen. Hippo struggled to inflict any damage, even with support from his comrades. It felt as if nothing could harm the creature. Fortunately, his body fat from his quirk absorbed some of the devastating blows. The two titans clashed again, engaging in a wrestling match, pushing against each other with all their might. Hippo finally gained the upper hand, using his greater mass to shove the Nomu into shelves and walls, trying to inflict damage. Desperate, he lifted the creature above his head and slammed it into the concrete, causing it to groan. However, as he attempted to lift the Nomu again, it retaliated with a powerful punch, knocking him back and injuring his arm. As he struggled to rise, the Nomu charged at him, opening its mouth wide. Confused by the creature's actions, Hippo tried to push it away, but the Nomu's strength was overwhelming. In a swift motion, it closed its jaws, and Hippo was defeated. The beast roared in triumph, while the other gang members watched in horror as their strongest ally fell. The Nomu turned to face them, its grin becoming more sinister as it charged, ready for more chaos. Izuku dodged an overhead punch from Tetsugami, slicing at the exposed side of the man. The blade only left a small cut, which made Tetsugami grin in satisfaction. Izuku, however, was merely testing his opponent. The battle continued, with Izuku weaving under Tetsugami's predictable strikes. He realized that his quirk enhanced his attacks, and he slammed his fist into the ground, cracking it. But this came at the cost of speed. He kept slashing, leaving minor cuts on Tetsugami, who remained unfazed. When Izuku sliced at Tetsugami's knee, he noticed a flinch. Perfect, a weak spot. Allowing Tetsugami to charge, Izuku pulled out his revolver and shot his knee. The bullet struck true, causing Tetsugami to fall in pain, clutching his injury. Izuku then delivered a swift kick to the man's head, knocking him out. He decided that this opponent would be useful alive. Turning around, he saw Kabuto's claw cannon aimed directly at him, the sound of its charge echoing ominously. Kabuto raged about how Izuku had ruined everything, his business, wealth, and workers, and declared he would take Izuku's head as they both fell. Just as he prepared to fire, a long tongue snatched the cannon away at the last moment. Kabuto looked on in horror as the jaw Nomu, covered in the remnants of its fallen comrades, held onto his arm with its tongue. Izuku snapped his fingers, and a beam of energy sliced through Kabuto's cannon arm, eliciting a scream of agony. Kabuto surveyed the scene, realizing most of his men lay dead, BLDs staining the warehouse floor. He turned to face Izuku and his allies, Kurogiri, Toga, the Black Nomu, and the Lens Nomu, whose eye glowed ominously. Finally, Izuku stood at the center, surveying his new team of villains. He declared that Kabuto would now lose his life, commanding the jaw Nomu to eat. The creature crawled toward Kabuto, its grin widening impossibly as it prepared to fulfill its MSDR's command. Kabuto's screams echoed through the warehouse, marking the end of his reign. Then there was silence, interrupted only by a crunch. Izuku, now coming down from the adrenaline high, sank to the ground. This was his first real mission, and he felt a sense of accomplishment. Toga was gleefully collecting as much BLD as she could, while Kurogiri sent the 2 extra Nomu back to the factory. Kurogiri expressed concern for Shigaraki, noting that this mission was definitely a step up from what he was accustomed to. Shigaraki reassured him that he was fine, feeling better than ever after completing his first real mission from Sensei. He just needed a moment to catch his breath after all the action. Kurogiri nodded, relieved that the young youngster was handling it better than he had anticipated. Over the months, a more parental bond had formed between them, something Kurogiri was reluctant to admit. Toga had joined them a couple of weeks ago after being evicted from her previous home in Kyushu. Izuku glanced at the Black Nomu that was with them, a gift from Sensei for his idea involving a new type of trigger. This was the very reason they needed trigger in the first place, to enhance the Nomu beyond their current capabilities. He had grown attached to the creature, especially since it was designed to take down All Might. However, during this trial run, he noticed some issues, particularly regarding weight. While shock absorption and super regeneration were effective quirks, they didn't address the possibility of All Might pushing them beyond their limits. Despite Sensei claiming that All Might was weaker now, Izuku didn't want to take any chances. He aimed for the Nomu to surpass All Might, not just match him. His gaze shifted to Tetsugami, who lay unconscious on the floor. Izuku thought with delight that Tetsugami's quirk could be useful for the Nomu, hoping the doctor would appreciate it as much as he did. He then turned to his companions, urging them to get the trigger back home before any heroes arrived. They didn't want to attract public attention just yet. An hour later, the police arrived at the scene. Most of the drags were collected, but the significant amount of the now-defunct Eastern Dragons gang's trigger was missing. News stations reported on a fierce confrontation in the upper regions of Tokyo, with no knowledge of the assailants who had taken down the entire Eastern Dragons in a single night. Later that same night, somewhere else, All for One smiled at the screen before him. Thanks to the 𝐒𝐻𝐬's camera head, he could use his quirk, I Spy, to observe his young protege. He had only controlled the black 𝐒𝐻𝐬 for a short time, but in that PRD, he learned how to command it with simple yet effective instructions. The other two 𝐒𝐻𝐬 were merely for show. He didn't need them, but allowing Shigaraki to command multiple 𝐒𝐻𝐬 at once was essential for him to become the symbol of fear. What truly impressed All for One was Izuku's leadership abilities. With only 2 competent members of the league, he made the most of their skills. All for One enjoyed watching Izuku utilize his intellect alongside 𝐒𝐻𝐬's portals and Toga's infiltration techniques to gain the upper hand. Before their enemies realized what was happening, Izuku had already dismantled their forces. It was a strategy All for One would have employed himself, and he felt immense pride. When he assigned Izuku this mission, it was primarily a test to gauge how far the young boy had progressed. Through his training with 𝐒𝐻𝐬 and his escapades with Toga in the streets of Kyushu, Izuku had proven himself capable, commanding loyal minions with ease. He was indeed a remarkable young man, even if the name League of Villains was somewhat cliché. All for One knew that Izuku would eventually come up with something better. It was time. All for One sensed that his protege was truly coming into his own, and he was ready. Using his technopathy quirk, he called Dr. Garaki from his lab. After 2 rings, the doctor answered. "Greetings, 𝐒𝐻𝐬. What do I owe the pleasure?" Dr. Garaki inquired. "How are the experiments with the Neo trigger progressing?" All for One asked, pleased with Izuku's idea. The doctor shared his enthusiasm, recognizing that a trigger capable of inducing a sort of faux awakening in the 𝐒𝐻𝐬's quirks could significantly enhance the 𝐒𝐻𝐬 creation process. "It is progressing slowly, but the tests I've conducted show promise. I just need more trigger to work with. It could take about 8 months to stabilize a prototype of the Neo trigger," Garaki replied. "That's perfectly fine, doctor. Take your time. You perform best when there is no pressure," All for One assured him. "I appreciate that, my lord." "I won't fail," Garaki responded. "I know you won't." All for One paused for a moment, allowing himself to breathe. "Doctor, I believe Izuku is ready." "Oh, are you certain, 𝐒𝐻𝐬? It's only been a few months. Will he be able to handle it?" Dr. Garaki asked, concerned. The procedure was different from what All for One typically conducted, as this particular quirk was relentless, requiring a strong body and will to manage. "Are you doubting my judgment, doctor?" All for One inquired. "No, I would never question you. I just want the boy to be prepared. It seems a bit early, that's all," Garaki stammered, trying to appease the formidable figure. "You are correct in that regard, doctor. It does seem early for him. However, this procedure could take up to 6 months before he is fully prepared. I have witnessed his rapid growth. He is developing faster than I ever imagined. Did you know he actually knocked 𝐒𝐻𝐬 down the other day, even while 𝐒𝐻𝐬 was using his quirk? The boy's analytical mind has evolved significantly since I found him. It would be wise for him to become familiar with his quirk before making his public debut." I understand, my lord. Forgive me, I just don't want to waste such a talented individual. I too have grown attached to the boy. He may not visit often, but his suggestions for enhancing our 𝐒𝐻𝐬 have inspired new ideas. Just today, 𝐒𝐻𝐬 sent me a man with a metal bones quirk to add to our all-might killer, Garaki said with a smile. He mentioned that the young boy directed him to me, as the 𝐒𝐻𝐬 was pushed back despite its strength rivaling All Might's. I believe it could add the necessary weight and strength to surpass All Might. It would be unfortunate for the young boy to face dire consequences during the procedure. Yes, I understand. But that's the point. He needed to be properly bonded before then, with preparations ready in about a week's time. That should provide enough time for the boy to be prepared and ready. All for One grinned maniacally. The quirk he was planning to give Izuku would be one of the doctor's best works yet, surpassing even 𝐒𝐮𝐬's quirk. It was designed to channel the boy's inner turmoil, allowing him to perceive nothing but chaos, just as intended. Although it was more technical than All for One preferred, in Izuku's hands, it could be wielded to its fullest potential. No, Izuku was no longer the right name for him. He had a much better one that truly embodied the new boy reborn. It was time to show the world just how fragile it really was. A week later, Izuku awoke on a Saturday morning, unsure of what to expect. It was 8 o'clock, and he had barely slept after last night's training and hunting. They had returned late after shopping for some nice clothes following a successful outing in Naruhata. Arriving back at the bar around 3 in the morning, they had gone to bed after receiving a gentle reprimand from 𝐒𝐮𝐬 for staying out so late. Lying in bed, he turned to his left and found Toga sleeping peacefully next to him, cuddled up against him. She had taken to this habit ever since moving in with Izuku and 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Although she had her own room, she often chose to join him whenever she felt like it. Izuku found it difficult to tell her otherwise, as she was adept at pushing his buttons. His cheeks flushed when he realized she was still holding on to him, her face adorably peaceful in sleep. He thought to himself, "Wait, cute?" as he attempted to gently pry his arm from her grasp. Unfortunately, she shifted in her sleep, tightening her hold on him. He sighed, realizing he was stuck. This was going to be a challenge for him. He tried to wake her softly, saying he needed to get up. Toga stirred, her eyes fluttering open momentarily before she buried herself deeper into him, mumbling that it was too early. Izuku chuckled softly, recognizing this as typical behavior for Toga. She was a night owl and definitely not a morning person, while he needed to rise early, as his parents rarely made breakfast for him, only for Izumi. He would prepare his own meals, brush his teeth, freshen up, and be ready for school before either of his parents came downstairs. He pleaded with Toga to release him, and after a moment, she lifted her head, half opening one eye to meet his bright emerald gaze. A mischievous grin spread across her face as she teased him about calling her by her first name instead of her family name. This was a conversation they had had before, and he reluctantly agreed to her request. After he addressed her as 𝐒𝐮𝐬, she begrudgingly loosened her grip, allowing him to rise and head to the door. As soon as he left the room, she promptly fell back asleep. As Izuku made his way downstairs, he spotted 𝐒𝐮𝐬 preparing breakfast. Although the bar was primarily set up for drinks, it also had a stove, fridge, and other kitchen amenities behind the alcohol shelf. Unfortunately, Nomu was not in his usual corner. The doctor had taken him after the raid to work on him further, so he wasn't ready yet. Izuku missed the big creature, who had been a good listener, even if he didn't understand anything being said. Taking a seat on one of the stools at the counter, Izuku greeted 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who acknowledged him and informed him that breakfast was almost ready. Izuku nodded and pulled out his phone to pass the time, scrolling through the usual hero news. Mirko was climbing the rankings, Endeavor was saving people from a burning building, and Lady Magenta had been making more appearances recently. The last piece of news made him clench his teeth, as it reminded him of his mother, who only seemed to care about his safety after he had left. As 𝐒𝐮𝐬 served him breakfast, Izuku continued to scroll through his phone until something caught his eye. A new report stated that the Eastern Dragons had been destroyed overnight, with no one knowing what had happened to them. It was gratifying to see the League's efforts recognized in the news, especially with heroes like Ingenium and Ryukyu on the scene, which added to their publicity. Once the League announced itself to the world, they would be known as a force not to be trifled with. Just then Toga, now 𝐒𝐮𝐬, finally made her way downstairs, slumping onto one of the stools with her head resting on the counter. She was still feeling drowsy. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 observed the young girl as she settled down and greeted her. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 requested breakfast, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 informed her that she could have it once she moved her head off the counter. With a reluctant sigh, she lifted her head, only to lean on her arm instead. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 sighed again and handed her a plate of breakfast. Izuku inquired about his training for the day, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 looked at him with uncertainty. He explained that there would be no training today, as Sensei had called for Izuku after breakfast and mentioned it was important. This left Izuku puzzled, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who was starting to wake up, shared his confusion. Sensei hadn't needed him for a while, Since the league began to form, he had been sent out less frequently on scouting missions. The only times he left the bar or the training warehouse were during hunts with 𝐒𝐬𝐬. The screen behind them lit up, displaying a purple glow with audio-only text. Sensei's voice came through, addressing Izuku directly. He expressed a need for Izuku that day and mentioned that 𝐒𝐬𝐬 would open a warp gate to the lab once he was finished. Izuku wondered what Sensei required of him, suspecting it might be another scouting mission. However, Sensei clarified that it was something different, a reward for Izuku's success with the Eastern Dragons. This revelation caused Izuku to pause, his eyes widening in realization. Sensei confirmed that it was time for Izuku to receive his quirk, which had been specially prepared by the doctor. He warned that Izuku would be away from the bar for some time, urging him to say his goodbyes before the procedure began. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬, filled with suspicion, asked how long it would take. Sensei replied that the procedure should only take a few months, which shocked both young individuals. Even 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 appeared surprised. Izuku questioned why acquiring a quirk was more complicated than simply placing a hand on him. Sensei explained that the quirk they had created was more relentless and required a specific person with the will to control it, which was why it would take longer to bind to him. This notion unnerved Izuku, as it implied a dangerous quirk that even Sensei wouldn't handle lightly. Yet, he felt reassured that if Sensei believed he could manage it, then he could too. He glanced at 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬, who looked worried. He understood her concern. A dangerous quirk would be implanted in him, and he would be gone for months. She had been the first person to genuinely care for him, and he respected her deeply as both an individual and a friend. Turning to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬, Izuku noted the uncertainty in his expression, hidden behind the smoke that obscured his face. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 had been a protective figure in Izuku's life, even more so than his own parents. Izuku contemplated leaving his newfound family, even if only temporarily. He turned back to the screen and asked how long it would take to prepare everything. Sensei assured him that the doctor had everything ready and encouraged him to take his time. After a moment of reflection, Izuku decided he needed about 10 minutes to inform his friends of what they would be doing in his absence. Sensei agreed, emphasizing that such matters should not be rushed. As the screen turned off, Izuku faced his companions, both of whom looked uncertain about his decision. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 was the first to voice her concern, asking if he was sure about this choice. Izuku met her gaze, noting the change in her eyes, which had shifted from their usual cat-like shape to a more human appearance. This transformation indicated her distress over the possibility of him leaving her, even if only temporarily. He acknowledged her feelings, reassuring her that he understood her reluctance. He explained that gaining this power would help them achieve their dreams, a world free from corruption, where they could finally be happy together. Although still apprehensive, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬 recognized Izuku's point. She had often expressed her longing to live in a world where she could be herself, and Izuku represented that possibility. Izuku held her hand, looking deeply into her eyes as he promised he wouldn't turn his back on her. He expressed gratitude for her friendship and assured her that he would return to make their dreams a reality. In a flashback, Toga and Izuku sat on the edge of a rooftop, observing the criminals below. It was a week after the death of Principal 𝐼𝐼𝐻𝐿, and Toga had taken Izuku out on hunts to satisfy her bloodthirst. While Izuku provided her with some of his BLD, she often craved more than he could give. He watched intently, analyzing the scene, while Toga's predatory grin revealed her excitement for new prey. As they observed, Izuku reflected on his first experience in an alleyway, recalling his near-death encounter and how he met Sensei. Curiosity about Toga's presence there prompted him to ask her a question. She shifted her focus to him, eager to hear what he had to say. Izuku expressed his longing to understand her motivations for being a villain, noting that while he had shared his reasons, he had never heard hers. For a moment, everything felt still as Toga's expression shifted, her grin faltering. She reassured him that he didn't have to share if he didn't want to, but he insisted it was only fair. Taking a deep breath, Toga opened up about her past, revealing that her home life had not been the best. She had been treated as a monster for something she was born with, leading her to repress herself for many years. After a long time, Izuku finally tasted BLD and realized that he shouldn't try to fit in. He should be true to himself. He didn't have a noble reason to dismantle hero society like others did, but he wanted to create a world where he could find happiness. It was as simple as that. As he gazed into Himiko's gleaming golden eyes, he absorbed her words and smiled, feeling a sense of alignment in their goals. He wanted to destroy the corrupt system so that people like him wouldn't suffer, and he would help build the world that would bring her joy. For the first time, Izuku felt like a hero, someone capable of saving others from the darkest aspects of life. If he had to be a hero for the villains, perhaps his old dream could finally become a reality. Himiko was on the verge of tears, yet she managed to bring forth a genuine smile, one that was free from her usual predatory nature. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 observed this moment with mixed emotions, feeling both happiness and sadness that the young MSTR was maturing so quickly. Despite the bumps along the way, it was remarkable to see such emotional maturity in someone his age. It was a poignant reminder of how life had shaped them. Izuku turned to 𝐒𝐮𝐬 as the bartender set down a glass and sighed. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 expressed that he couldn't stop Izuku from seizing this opportunity but wanted him to know that they would be there when he returned. Izuku nodded, fully understanding 𝐒𝐮𝐬's sentiment. The league would remain intact despite his departure. After all, that was the purpose of their formation. As he bid farewell to both of them, receiving a hug from Himiko, he stepped into the portal that 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had created. Upon entering the underground science lab, Izuku was greeted by the eerie glow of purple lights illuminating the dark space. The walls were lined with jars labeled with various quirks, and to the right, rows of Nomu were being engineered and stored. Although he had only visited a few times, the sight of the Nomu storage lingered in his nightmares. In front of him stood Sensei and Dr. Garaki, positioned on either side of an operating table. They were engaged in conversation when Izuku arrived, capturing their attention. Sensei welcomed him, indicating that he had arrived at the perfect moment and gestured for him to approach the table. Izuku walked toward the table cautiously, inspecting it with wary eyes. It was impeccably clean, devoid of dust, BLD, or rust, appearing brand new. He glanced at the medical equipment, surgical tools, and foredrip, and various chemicals on a moving shelf that he was reluctant to inquire about. His gaze then fell upon a jar at the center, connected to a peculiar machine adorned with glowing purple lines, resembling something from a distant future. The jar was cylindrical and large enough to contain a cat, but inside it was a black and red substance that moved unnaturally, as if it were alive. The label read, "Corrosion," and he could sense the potential danger it held. This was intended to be his quirk. As he leaned closer to the operating table, the substance suddenly ceased its movement. A presence that was neither the doctor nor Sensei enveloped him, causing his eyes to widen in fear, a feeling he hadn't experienced since the sludge villain or Sensei's first appearance. Yet, there was also an allure, a calling that urged him to draw nearer. Whether this heightened his anticipation for the procedure, he couldn't tell. Sensei observed the interaction with keen interest, a menacing smile forming on his face. He sensed that they were beginning to understand one another, and he encouraged the continuation of the process. He instructed Izuku to lie down, and Izuku complied, staring up at the bright hospital light. The operating table was far from comfortable, but he had little expectation otherwise. Dr. Garaki explained that he would first put Izuku under, as the procedure would take time and he would need to be asleep for most of it. He warned that nightmares might occur due to the prolonged state of unconsciousness, and that dreams and hallucinations would be prevalent during the process. If anything happened in his mind, it would merely be an illusion born from boredom. Izuku looked at the doctor, confusion evident on his face. Nightmares? Hallucinations? He wondered what he had gotten himself into, but it was too late to turn back now. He nodded silently, trying to make himself as comfortable as possible. Dr. Garaki nodded in return as he prepared the syringe to administer the anesthetic. Izuku felt the effects immediately as the world around him began to spin. His eyes grew heavy, and his vision blurred. His body felt numb and immobile. Just before he succumbed to unconsciousness, Sensei spoke his final words to Izuku, indicating that when he awoke, he would no longer be Izuku but something new and greater, Fushoku Shigaraki. With those parting words, his mind plunged into darkness. Usually, dreams only last for about 2 minutes, but this darkness persisted for nearly an hour. He questioned his mind's creativity, overwhelmed by the endless void. Suddenly, a tingling sensation coursed through his body. Initially, it felt like static electricity, but then a more intense discomfort set in, as if his skin were ablaze, something crawling beneath it, consuming him from within. He attempted to scream but found himself unable to move. His eyes remained shut despite his efforts to open them. All he could do was endure. Gradually, the darkness around him began to dissolve, transforming into a liquid that shaped his surroundings. The pain started to diminish as the environment became clearer. Dark puddles morphed into walls, doors, furniture, and memories. Then he saw something he thought he had left behind, his old house. 𝐼 and Dr. Garaki observed Izuku from outside. The boy was suspended in a stasis tank, similar to the Nomu, designed to provide a stable environment for him to adapt to the wild quirk. Dr. Garaki reported that everything appeared stable, noting that the quirk had just begun to enter Izuku's system and should fully integrate within 2 months. They had been conducting this operation for 4 months, having inserted the quirk 2 months prior, and it was only now starting to take effect. They aimed for his body to be in peak condition before the quirk had even begun to influence him. 𝐼 inquired if the boy's body was handling the quirk well. Dr. Garaki confirmed that he had provided the quirk with a genetic sample of Izuku's DNA to facilitate the merging process. His highly adaptable body would likely accept the quirk better than anyone else on the planet. 𝐼 stepped closer to the tank, admiring Izuku's sleeping form, which was connected to various wires and tubes for breathing and nourishment. The boy wore a simple black t-shirt and breathes, designed to be waterproof. His eyes appeared tired yet peaceful, indicating he was experiencing something profound. Dr. Garaki expressed curiosity about why 𝐼 had requested the addition of his own DNA to the quirk. 𝐼 explained that he was considering the future. When his heir was ready to inherit his quirk, it would be easier for the quirk to recognize it as familiar rather than foreign. This would also ensure that Izuku could handle additional quirks more effectively. Dr. Garaki acknowledged the brilliance of this strategy, noting that corrosion, by nature, was entirely destructive, consuming everything in its path, including viruses, which was an unintended benefit. Without the MSDR's DNA, corrosion would have perceived the quirk as a threat and reacted aggressively, jeopardizing their ultimate plan. However, 𝐼 had another reason for his decision. He revealed that his quirk fueled his longing for collection, which was intrinsic to his nature. He anticipated that corrosion would adapt this longing but twist it into something fueled by hatred, destruction, and death. This transformation would undoubtedly influence Izuku's mind, making it easier for 𝐼 to guide him down a specific path. He recognized the boy's heart, which burned brightly, reminiscent of his late brother's. 𝐼 could identify a hero's heart when he saw one, and he viewed it as the only flaw in Izuku. While the boy was working for their cause, 𝐼 needed assurance that he would remain aligned with their goals. Izuku gazed down the hallway of the house he had left behind. He examined the pictures adorning the walls, images of Inko, Izumi, and surprisingly, himself alongside Hisashi. Why were these memories here? They had been taken down after his father's passing. He walked slowly through the hallway, puzzled by why his mind was presenting him with these reminders. Was it the quirk at work? He sought answers to his questions. Upon reaching his old room, he found it surprisingly vibrant. The walls were painted a cheerful sky blue, filled with All Might merchandise, which he found distasteful. Next, he entered his bathroom, which appeared older than he remembered, still undergoing renovations. Looking into the mirror, he frowned at his reflection. His green hair had grown long, nearly obscuring his eyes, as he had not had time for a haircut since becoming a villain. A long scar crossed the right side of his face, giving him a disheveled appearance. Some of his freckles were obscured by scar tissue, and a small slicing scar beneath his left eye was a reminder of his first encounter with Toga. He barely recognized himself. As he descended the staircase, he heard voices outside. With each step, he realized the memory he was witnessing. He saw his father, Hisashi Midoriya, seated at the dining table. The front door swung open, and a younger version of himself rushed in, followed by his sister and mother. The two children called out excitedly, running to embrace their father. Hisashi greeted them warmly, asking about their day. The voice felt foreign to Izuku, a sound he had not heard in ages. Hisashi's loving smile radiated warmth and comfort as the children animatedly recounted their day, while 𝐒𝐮𝐬 leaned in to kiss him on the forehead before heading to the kitchen. Izuku watched with a small smile, recalling a time when he felt truly happy and part of the family. He observed as Hisashi used his fire breath to create small sparks that resembled fireworks, delighting the children, who watched in awe. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 scolded Hisashi for the display, and he laughed nervously in response. This was a cherished memory, a glimpse of happiness that had long since faded. But then, the ground and walls transformed into dark sludge, and the memory of his family dissolved into the darkness. Izuku nearly stumbled back as the scene shifted once more, returning to the same house, now shrouded in shadows. The only source of light came from the television, where young Izuku and Izumi watched in shock. Izuku moved closer to see what was on the screen. The broadcast detailed the devastation of Mizudafu General Hospital, featuring the hero Lady Magneto among others. Tragically, the destruction had claimed many innocent lives caught in the chaos. As the names of the confirmed deceased were read aloud, Hisashi's name was mentioned. Izuku observed as both children silently wept, and he felt tears welling in his own eyes. This moment was a painful memory that had haunted him, a reminder of how his family was forever changed by this tragedy. Suddenly, the sludge returned, shifting the surroundings. Once everything stabilized, Izuku noticed the photographs on the walls. There were no images of Hisashi, except for one displayed near the door alongside his grandmother, Nana. Most of the pictures had been replaced with those of Toshinori. Although a few images of himself remained, they were scarce. The scene mirrored a previous memory, with Toshinori sitting in the same spot where his father once sat. Anger surged within Izuku at the sight of the man who had shattered his family, making him wish for the chance to confront him. Yet, he reminded himself that this was merely a memory. He noted that Toshinori still had the whites in his eyes, a stark contrast to the way he had appeared after the surgery 5 years prior. As voices from outside drifted in, Izumi and their mother entered first. Izumi seemed unusually cheerful, while their mother wore a calm smile. The last to enter was Izuku, his heart heavy with sorrow. He thought to himself, "Oh no, not today." This was the day they received their quirks? Or at least, Izumi did. Izumi excitedly announced that she had discovered her quirk. Toshinori, lifting her into his arms, expressed his delight and asked what her quirk was. She struggled to pronounce it, finally exclaiming, "Telekinesis." Toshinori spun her around, eliciting laughter from the child. He praised her, saying she could become a great hero. When Toshinori turned to Izuku, he found the boy staring at the ground, lost in thought. Confused, Toshinori asked 𝐒𝐮𝐬 what was wrong with Izuku. 𝐒𝐮𝐬, looking worried, explained that physically he was fine, but the doctor had informed them that he was quirkless. Toshinori's expression shifted to one of pity as he looked at Izuku. The real Izuku felt a surge of anger at the pitying gaze directed at him, thinking, "You have no right to feel sorry for me. You've never been in my shoes." The environment shifted slightly, and the pictures on the wall changed to show 𝐒𝐮𝐬, Toshinori, and Izumi enjoying themselves, with not a single photo of him in sight. Suddenly, the floor beneath Izuku opened up, and he fell into a dark tunnel. When he landed, the bright light from outside momentarily blinded him. He recognized his old playground, complete with the small swing set, the steel slide that became too hot in the summer, and the sandpit. A wave of nostalgia washed over him as he recalled being bullied by Izumi, Bakugo, and their friends. Bakugo taunted him, questioning how he could ever be a hero without a quirk, while Izumi used her quirk to hurl stones at him. Izuku pleaded for them to stop, feeling helpless on the ground as he was bombarded. The real Izuku hated reliving this moment, witnessing the pain inflicted upon him for no reason. He rushed forward, attempting to push the bullies away. But the sludge returned, transforming the memories of his tormentors into a monstrous figure. The creature towered over the houses, its long, slender body resembling a worm. Its head was adorned with tendrils sprouting from its sludge-like form, and its maw was filled with jagged teeth, glimmering like hardened acid. At the center of its mouth was a single large red eye. The creature roared and lunged at Izuku, attempting to engulf him. He narrowly dodged its attack, realizing he was unarmed and unprepared for this fight. He had to think quickly or risk being devoured. Spotting a broken swing set, he noticed a pole that had been sharpened from being torn away. It would serve as a weapon. As the creature charged at him again, Izuku steadied himself, aimed, and hurled the makeshift spear into the creature's glowing red eye. The monster shrieked in agony, and the world around them began to disintegrate, the black sludge swirling into a whirlpool that pulled Izuku in. He spun and spun until he landed atop a few wooden desks. Slowly getting to his feet, he felt pain but noticed he was uninjured. "I guess the dream world is keeping me alive," he thought. As he lifted his head, he saw Bakugo, Izumi, and a few other bullies surrounding him, with Izumi holding his notebook aloft using her quirk. This was just a few months ago, Izuku realized as the scene unfolded like a toxic memory. He watched helplessly as Bakugo destroyed his notebook and threatened him not to attend you. Then came the cruel suggestion to take a swan dive off the roof, hoping for a heroic quirk in his next life. Izuku's vision turned red with fury as he attempted to confront Bakugo once more, but the sludge opened up again, transporting him to another location. This time, he found himself in a tunnel, where his younger self was speaking with all might. The hero's smile faltered as Izuku asked if a quirkless person like him could ever become a hero. All Might paused for a moment before responding that the world was filled with dangers that would be fatal for someone without a quirk. He suggested that perhaps Izuku could consider becoming a police officer, acknowledging their often overlooked heroism. He encouraged Izuku to dream, but urged him to be more realistic, expressing his reluctance to deliver the news of a young life lost. Izuku stood there, silently weeping. The real Izuku loathed this memory and felt deep resentment towards All Might, believing he had crushed every aspiration the boy held. He yearned to be a hero, to save others. He vowed to prove everyone wrong and become someone people could admire. Whether for heroes or villains, he felt no concern. All of it was to defy the man who had shattered his dreams. As he contemplated this, a sludge-like hand emerged from the ground, lunging toward Izuku. He was taken by surprise and couldn't evade in time, allowing the hand to push him back. The ground in front of him morphed into a grotesque smile. Its teeth formed from hardened acid as its mouth opened wide, swallowing Izuku whole. He plummeted into what seemed like an endless abyss, distorted faces appearing on the walls around him. They taunted him, voices echoing in his mind, telling him he didn't belong, that he should just give up. The relentless barrage of negativity overwhelmed him, and he felt himself spiraling deeper into despair. Eventually, Izuku stopped falling and began to regain his bearings. He looked around and found himself trapped in a glass box, surrounded by black sludge that refused to take shape. His gaze fell upon Izumi, Bakugo, and All Might, who were encircled by others. Panic surged within him as he realized the dire situation. In the center of the group lay Toga and Kurogiri, their clothes tattered, with signs of injury marring their bodies. Izuku pounded on the glass, desperate to break free, but it remained unyielding. He watched in horror as his friends were attacked again, each blow echoing in his mind as they cried out in pain. The sludge began to pour into the box, and dread filled him. He was powerless to save them. As he struck the glass repeatedly, taunts filled his head, each word a reminder of his perceived worthlessness. But then, amidst the chaos, he caught sight of Himiko, her battered form struggling to speak. Her single open eye locked onto his, and she asked why he had failed her. In that moment, Izuku's world shattered. Rage surged through him, igniting a fire within. He struck the glass with all his strength, a crack forming with each blow. Outside, his body began to tremble, a dark substance seeping from his skin into the murky water surrounding him. He continued to strike the wall, ignoring the sludge that filled the box. With each hit, black veins crept up his arms, a sign of the transformation taking place within him. The water darkened further as he fought against his confinement. Finally, he broke free, his eyes glowing a fierce red as he charged toward the memories of his friends. With a guttural roar, his face morphed, a mask of black liquid forming with acidic fangs. He reached for Bakugo, and the memory began to dissolve before him. The same fate befell Izumi. When he turned to All Might, the only one to meet his gaze, it braced for impact. But Izuku was too quick, grabbing All Might and slamming him down. His fury erupted as he declared his hatred for them all, vowing they would face consequences. In that moment, his hair transformed to a pale yellow, completing his metamorphosis. The glass shattered, releasing the murky water onto the floor. Fushoku Shigaraki had been reborn. As Dr. Garaki assessed his supplies, a loud crack echoed from the resurrection bay. Shocked, he turned to see the Nomu were not supposed to react. They were meant to remain lifeless until activated. This could mean only one thing. The boy had awakened. He pressed a button on his control panel, and a black portal opened, allowing All for One to step through. Annoyance flickered across his face as he inquired why he had been summoned at such an hour. Dr. Garaki's urgency was palpable as he exclaimed that Fushoku had arisen. All for One's irritation faded, replaced by a smile hidden beneath his mask. They moved swiftly to the room housing Fushoku's tank, where they found shattered glass scattered across the floor, a black liquid staining the surface. In the midst of the chaos lay Fushoku, his body glistening under the dim lights. His clothing hung in tatters, revealing a muscular physique, marked by small black stripes around his elbows and ribcage. His hair had transformed into an unnatural pale yellow, straighter than the wild locks he once had. His eyes shone a deep crimson, with black streaks resembling tears tracing down his face. As he took in his surroundings, Fushoku focused on the cold steel walls and the debris littering the floor. He noticed the pulsing black veins beneath his skin, moving in a rhythmic pattern. "It seems you've awakened, Fushoku," Dr. Garaki remarked, standing at the entrance with All for One. "And much sooner than anticipated, we expected you to remain dormant for another 2 weeks." "Indeed, quite the convenient awakening," All for One added, a glint of intrigue in his eyes. Dr. Garaki inquired about Fushoku's feelings. Fushoku examined himself closely, turning his body and lifting his legs, ensuring all his limbs were functioning properly. He expressed that he felt new, as if he had transformed into something different while still being himself. Dr. Garaki acknowledged this, noting that Fushoku had undergone an ordeal that had altered both his mind and body. As Dr. Garaki approached, he observed the change in Fushoku's eyes, which once sparkled with light but now glimmered with a calm yet fierce intensity. He suggested it was time to test Fushoku's new abilities, placing a hand on his shoulder. Fushoku's eyes widened with excitement as he looked at his hands and nodded eagerly, ready to explore the potential of his new quirk. With enthusiasm, Dr. Garaki proposed they head to the testing chamber, eager to see his creation in action. As they walked through the hall, Fushoku noticed the nomus scattered around. Among the 15, most were of lower or mid-tier classification, but one caught his attention. It was his Nomu, the one that had assisted in the Eastern Dragon's raid. Suspended in a purple tank, it appeared altered, with a crooked beak and a metallic sheen, now silver instead of yellow, and noticeably larger. Entering the test chamber, a large circular area covered in sand, they found targets and plastic dummies arranged throughout, ideal for testing quirks. Dr. Garaki and All for One moved to a side area, where a hidden door opened to reveal a room with a desk and various papers on quirks. Bulletproof glass allowed them to observe while remaining safe. Dr. Garaki activated a microphone, explaining that the chamber was typically used for testing quirks on Nomus but could be adapted for Fushoku. He instructed Fushoku to activate his quirk. Fushoku focused on his hand, struggling to summon his power. After a couple of minutes, he expressed his frustration at not knowing how to proceed. Seeing his struggle, Sensei suggested that Fushoku recall the feelings he experienced upon awakening. Fushoku reflected on the moment he had slammed All Might's head into the ground, and suddenly realization dawned on him. He closed his eyes, channeling his emotions into his hand. As he concentrated, black stripes began to spread across his forearm, transforming his fingernails into long claws. Opening his eyes, Fushoku marveled at his clawed hand, feeling a rush of excitement. He had finally obtained a quirk, something he had longed for throughout his life. The power surged within him, and he was eager to test it out. He turned toward the nearest humanoid-shaped dummy, a wicked smile forming as he charged forward, grasping its head. As his quirk activated, the dummy's head began to crack and disintegrate, black sludge forming around his hand as it consumed the plastic. Within moments, the dummy was reduced to a pile of gray sludge. Fushoku felt a sense of satisfaction wash over him, as if a long-held longing had finally been fulfilled. He was eager to repeat the experience, exhilarated by the destruction. Dr. Garaki and All for One observed Fushoku's enthusiasm as he prepared to destroy another dummy. Dr. Garaki noted that Fushoku's destructive tendencies were stronger than anticipated, likely due to the nature of his quirk. He remarked on the need for Fushoku to learn to control his instincts before they became overwhelming. All for One expressed hope that Fushoku would remain loyal, pleased to see the quirk functioning as intended. He suggested that Dr. Garaki intervene before they lost all their targets. Dr. Garaki complied, speaking into the microphone to instruct Fushoku to pause, as they needed to explore other abilities he might possess. Fushoku halted, reflecting on his mindscape for clues about his quirk. He recalled the black tendrils that had formed each memory and focused intently. Gradually, the stripes on his body expanded, creating a network around him. As he concentrated on his back, tendrils shot out, one after another. When he opened his eyes again, 4 tendrils were swirling behind him, though he struggled to control them, each writhing independently in different directions. He felt a surge of panic and called the tendrils back into his body. As he surveyed the chamber's walls, he noticed the tendrils had left behind lines and scratches on the steel surface. Guilt washed over him, prompting him to bow his head in apology to the wall. He expressed his regret for not being able to control his abilities. All for One reassured him, noting that testing new powers could be challenging. He acknowledged that even he faced difficulties when acquiring new quirks. The mentor found amusement in the fact that his young protégé still had the innocence of a child, even after his transformation, and a small smile crept onto his face. He suggested they would work on control later but emphasized the importance of exploring Fushoku's capabilities in the meantime. Fushoku's mind drifted back to a specific memory from his childhood, recalling the amalgamations that resided within him. One particular amalgamation stood out, possessing tendrils, destructive abilities, and acidic teeth. He focused intently, forming the black sludge around his arm. Concentrating further, he envisioned a knife, similar to Toga's. The sludge began to take shape, extending beyond his fist before hardening into a golden blade. As he wielded the blade, he found it surprisingly light, glimmering in the room's light. He turned toward a nearby dummy and slashed it across the chest. The blade sliced through effortlessly, and he noticed a sizzling sound emanating from the dummy as it began to decay from within. Fushoku contemplated the various ways he could utilize this newfound ability. Before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, the door to the observation room swung open, revealing Sensei and Dr. Garaki. Sensei reminded Fushoku that while he was eager to test his quirk, it was essential for him to rest and allow his body to adjust to the outside world. He also mentioned that 𝐒𝐻𝐬 and Toga were waiting to see him, and it had been a while since they last met. Fushoku's eyes widened in realization. He had completely forgotten about them. Anxiety washed over him as he wondered how they would react to his new appearance. Sensei placed a reassuring hand on Fushoku's shoulder, urging him to calm down. He reassured the boy that 𝐒𝐻𝐬 and Toga would appreciate the changes. Despite knowing they cared for him, the shadows of his past still haunted him, particularly the memories of seeing them injured. Dr. Garaki advised Fushoku to heed Sensei's words, explaining that his stamina would deplete more quickly due to his new quirk. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 would help him gain better control, and they would send a new and improved 𝐒𝐬 back to him after completing some final tests. Fushoku acknowledged their advice, admitting he was tired and ready to leave. All for One nodded and summoned 𝐒𝐬 to open a portal. As the black portal materialized, he reminded Fushoku that now that he possessed power, it was time to make a name for himself in the world. He hinted that All Might might be joining you as a teacher and encouraged Fushoku to use this information to establish his presence as a symbol of fear. With that, Fushoku stepped into the portal, the glowing golden lights surrounding him and providing a sense of familiarity. 𝐒𝐬 was busy cleaning glasses at the counter when he looked up to see Fushoku. His eyes widened in surprise as he took in Fushoku's transformed appearance. 𝐒𝐬 welcomed him back, noting how different he looked and inquiring about his well-being. Fushoku felt a warmth in his heart. 𝐒𝐬 had always been someone who cared for him. He replied that he was fine but tired after a long day. 𝐒𝐬 informed him that Toga had gone upstairs to sleep about an hour ago, expressing surprise at Fushoku's late return. Suddenly, Fushoku realized the time and exclaimed in shock. 𝐒𝐬 confirmed that it was 2:30 in the morning, explaining that he had wondered why he needed to open a portal so late. Just then, footsteps echoed down the stairwell, and Toga emerged, her messy blonde hair cascading down her back. She wore pink pajamas and had bags under her eyes. She glared at 𝐒𝐬 before turning her attention to Fushoku, initially not recognizing him. She threatened him, demanding silence so she could sleep. After a moment, Fushoku revealed his identity, and Toga's eyes widened in recognition as she rushed over to him. She expressed her excitement at his return, sharing how worried she had been and how she had tried to convince 𝐒𝐬 to open a portal for her to see him. Fushoku calmed her down, assuring her that he was back and encouraging her to breathe. Toga snuggled into his chest, expressing her relief and noticing changes in his physique and hair color. Fushoku explained that the changes were side effects of his quirk. Toga complimented his eyes, saying they reminded her of BLD and made him even more attractive. Fushoku chuckled at her playful remarks, appreciating the lightheartedness after months of struggle. He then turned serious, informing both Toga and 𝐒𝐬 about his plans to strengthen their league. He shared the news from Sensei regarding All Might's potential teaching role at 𝐒𝐬, and expressed their goal to create chaos before making their move. Fushoku's words resonated with Himiko and 𝐒𝐬 as they listened intently. Although he had previously struggled with self-confidence in battle, he now exuded a newfound assurance. The preparation for the raid on the Eastern Dragons had been extensive, fueled by Izuku's uncertainty about his readiness. It was 𝐒𝐬 and Himiko who had bolstered his confidence, setting the stage for the operation. Fushoku proposed calling upon Jiren for reinforcements, emphasizing the need for a substantial number of grunts. 𝐒𝐬 agreed to make the call the following morning. Fushoku continued, outlining their plan to create chaos across Japan, stirring the populace and challenging the heroes. Himiko, curious, inquired about the specifics of their chaotic endeavors. Fushoku then shifted the conversation, asking 𝐒𝐬 about their access to the lower-tier 𝐒𝐬 from the Eastern Dragons raid. 𝐒𝐬 confirmed their availability, prompting Fushoku to reveal their intention to orchestrate a prison break. Later that night, a police transport truck navigated the dimly lit streets of Mizudafu. The officers inside were weary, tasked with transferring a group of villains to a facility closer to Tokyo. The driver sighed, lamenting the monotony of paperwork and the missed opportunity to see his family. His partner echoed the sentiment, acknowledging the inevitability of their duty. As they conversed, a shadowy figure perched atop a nearby building observed the convoy, its glowing red eye fixated on them. Suddenly, a red beam of energy shot forth, striking the truck and sending it crashing to the side. The lens 𝐒𝐬 emerged, accompanied by 𝐒𝐬 and Fushoku, now clad in his villain attire. Fushoku praised the 𝐒𝐬 for its success and instructed 𝐒𝐬 to open a portal, allowing them to approach the wreckage. The driver regained consciousness, disoriented and injured, while his partner lay unconscious from the impact. As Fushoku and 𝐒𝐬 approached, the driver, shaken, weakly questioned their identities. Fushoku, with an imposing presence, responded that the dead had no need for such knowledge. He signaled the Nomu to step forward, which charged its eye laser, leaving the officer in distress. When the beams subsided, only remnants remained. Fushoku directed the Nomu to disable the transport's cameras, ensuring their actions went unnoticed. As they reached the back of the truck, 𝐒𝐬 offered to create a portal inside, but Fushoku opted to use his quirk instead. Black, claw-like hands emerged from his glove, melting the back doors away. Upon entering the convoy, Fushoku found the villains inside groaning from the crash but otherwise unharmed. He introduced the League of Villains and invited them to join in dismantling Hero Society. Among the villains, he spotted a familiar green sludge and approached it. The sludge villain, recognizing Fushoku, expressed surprise and fear. Fushoku reminded him of their past encounter, suggesting they share a common goal: revenge against All Might. 2 days later, Fushoku sat at a counter, drumming his fingers in impatience. The broker, 𝐼REN, was late for their important meeting. 𝐒𝐬 sensed Fushoku's tension and urged him to be patient, assuring him that 𝐼REN would arrive soon. Fushoku expressed his frustration, feeling that they could be accomplishing tasks instead of waiting for someone who was late. He quickly realized his outburst and took a deep breath, apologizing to 𝐒𝐬 for raising his voice. He was simply annoyed. 𝐒𝐬 nodded in response, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Ever since Fushoku returned from his operation, he had seemed different, experiencing random outbursts, impatience, and a temper that was uncharacteristic of him. 𝐒𝐬 attributed this change to Fushoku's adjustment to his quirk, which seemed to be affecting his mindset, much like the tumultuous changes of adolescence. He also noted that Fushoku appeared indifferent to the lives of others, a stark contrast to Izuku, who would never condone harming innocent people. Fushoku's disdain for society and its inhabitants had grown, perhaps due to the operation altering his perspective. Toga approached Fushoku from behind, playfully suggesting that he lighten up, offering to help improve his mood. She had not fully embraced Fushoku's name change, often referring to him as Izuku in private, while using Fushoku in public to keep his past identity a secret. Fushoku felt a flush of embarrassment and asked her to refrain from teasing him at that moment. Before they could continue their conversation, a knock echoed through the room. As the door swung open, a cloud of smoke billowed in. 𝐼REN entered, apologizing for his late arrival, explaining that he had to ensure they weren't being followed. Dressed in his signature purple blazer and matching breathes, with a fluffy scarf and blue-tinted glasses, he exuded a confident demeanor, a cigar in his mouth producing a steady stream of smoke. Upon fully entering, he inquired if he had interrupted anything. 𝐒𝐬 assured 𝐼REN that his timing was perfect and invited him to proceed with their business. 𝐼REN then introduced a new recruit who had accompanied him, a man clad in a black and gray bodysuit with red and cyan cuffs. 𝐼REN vouched for the man, claiming he was powerful and loyal, despite only having a history of petty crimes. The newcomer introduced himself as Twice, expressing a mix of enthusiasm and disdain for the group. He had heard about their goal to dismantle Hero Society and was eager to join, though he also seemed to express a longing to remain uninvolved with their cause. Fushoku regarded Twice with curiosity, recognizing the potential for chaos that could arise from his abilities. Fushoku introduced himself as the leader of the League of Villains, presenting 𝐒𝐬 as his second-in-command and Toga as another member. Toga eagerly welcomed Twice, excited about new members and hinting at her penchant for causing chaos. Fushoku urged Toga to calm down, reminding her that Twice had just arrived and needed time to adjust. After Toga stepped back, Fushoku welcomed Twice to the League, explaining their mission to change the current society, which they believed was plagued by neglect and oppression. He emphasized the need to clear obstacles to achieve their goals and asked if Twice understood the commitment he was making. Twice enthusiastically affirmed his willingness to join, and Fushoku inquired about his quirk. Twice demonstrated his ability, producing a black sludge that transformed into a cardboard box, explaining that he could create duplicates of anything, living or inanimate, as long as he had precise measurements. Fushoku was intrigued by Twice's quirk, recognizing its potential for support within their operations. After welcoming Twice officially, Fushoku directed him to make himself comfortable, as the location served as their base of operations. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 was available to assist him with anything he needed. Twice engaged in conversation with 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and Toga, while Fushoku took a seat beside Jiren. Fushoku discussed the financial arrangements for Twice's recruitment, indicating that 𝐒𝐮𝐬 would handle the details. He also wanted to share a significant project he had in mind. Jiren expressed interest, prompting Fushoku to reveal that their league had recently orchestrated an attack on a prison convoy, resulting in the escape of several villains. Jiren acknowledged the impressive feat, noting the caliber of villains involved, and Fushoku explained that their mission was to create chaos across Mizudafu and its neighboring areas to keep heroes occupied for a while. He then unveiled his plan to launch a major assault on 𝐒𝐮𝐬, revealing that he had information about All Might teaching there this year. Jiren was taken aback, questioning the likelihood of the #1 hero taking on such a role. Fushoku reassured him of the credibility of his sources and outlined his strategy, mentioning that he had a Nomu capable of confronting All Might. He expressed the need for additional support, specifically low-level thugs and criminals who wouldn't be overly invested in their cause. They would serve as mere distractions, though it was best not to inform them of that. They would attack any heroes or students, relying on their sheer numbers. Assistance was sought in acquiring these new recruits. That could be arranged, but it would come at a cost. Sufficient funds were available. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 would send half up front, with the remainder to follow upon completion. When were these recruits needed? In a few months. The 𝐒𝐮𝐬 entrance exam was in about 2 months, and the first day of school would be around March. There was plenty of time for someone with his skills. There was no need for flattery. The arrangement was understood, but payment was essential. A deal was struck. Achiko Uraraka had just left her apartment. It had been about a week since she moved to Mizudafu, and her nerves were palpable. She was leaving her parents and friends behind to attend a new school, which was understandably daunting. Yet, it was all for her dream of attending 𝐒𝐮𝐬. As a child, she wished to support her parents, who owned a construction business that struggled to find enough work. Uraraka aspired to become a hero, primarily to ease her parents' burdens. With her quirk, she could help lift construction materials, move machinery, and earn enough to provide them with a comfortable life. While her longing to be a rescue hero like her favorite, 13, was significant, her parents' well-being took precedence. It was a surprise when her parents rented an apartment for her to stay in during her transition from junior high to high school. She had tried to refuse, not wanting them to spend so much money, but they insisted it was more practical than commuting back and forth. As she approached Aldra Junior High, she noted that it wasn't the most prestigious school, but it was affordable. Upon entering the gate, she felt the eyes of many students on her, and her anxiety spiked. She just wanted the day to end. The homeroom teacher introduced her to the class, urging them to behave. Uraraka stepped forward, introducing herself and bowing respectfully. She was directed to an empty seat at the back middle of the classroom, unaware that 2 students, Bakugo and Izumi, were watching her closely. Classes proceeded as usual, and when the lunch bell rang, all the students left for the cafeteria. Uraraka remained at her table near the doorway, eating the rice she had packed. After classes resumed, the school day finally came to an end. As she gathered her belongings and exited the classroom, a loud noise echoed from behind her. Turning around, she saw a boy on the ground, his uniform marked by a burnt hole. Bakugo loomed over him, flanked by 2 of his friends, while Izumi observed from the other side of the room, her expression disapproving. Bakugo demanded the money the boy owed him, threatening him with sparks crackling in his hands. The boy pleaded, claiming he would have the money the next day. Just as Bakugo aimed to intimidate him further, Uraraka intervened, stepping in front of the boy to shield him. She shouted for Bakugo to stop, asserting that using his quirk in such a manner was illegal. Bakugo glared at her, dismissing her with a harsh remark. He insisted that the boy needed to learn a lesson and warned her to step aside if she valued her safety. Uraraka stood her ground, determined to put an end to the confrontation. Bakugo's anger flared, and he felt a familiar frustration rise within him, reminiscent of his encounters with Deku. Just as he prepared to retaliate, an unseen force restrained him. Izumi urged him to back down, suggesting it wasn't worth the trouble. Bakugo snapped at her, but her commanding tone silenced him, prompting him to follow her lead, leaving his confused companions behind. Uraraka sighed in relief and turned to the boy she had protected, asking if he was all right. He groaned as he attempted to sit up, admitting that his chest was a bit burnt. She offered to take him to the nurse, unsure of their location. He thanked her, and she smiled, stating that helping others was what heroes did. Meanwhile, Bakugo, Izumi, and a couple of their friends walked through an alley near the marketplace, the quickest route to the arcade. The alley was usually empty, as most villains avoided public areas. Izumi remained unusually quiet, her thoughts consumed by her brother's disappearance. While Bakugo didn't care much for Deku, Izumi was struggling with her emotions. She had never appreciated her brother's weaknesses, yet he was still family. Regret gnawed at her for the harsh words she had spoken. Their parents were frantic, searching for any sign of him, but leads had gone cold since his supposed kidnapping. She secretly hoped he was safe, envisioning a scenario where she could confront him, express her frustrations, and then reconcile, longing for the bond they once shared before their father passed away. Bakugo broke the silence, questioning Izumi about her reluctance to engage in conflict. She replied that they shouldn't start anything before entering as if it were a simple matter. Bakugo pressed further, accusing her of being soft since Deku's disappearance. This struck a nerve, and Izumi shot him a fierce glare, demanding he not speak about her brother in such a manner. Bakugo scoffed, dismissing Deku as a useless nerd, questioning her newfound concern for him. Izumi countered, frustrated by the conversation, and wondered why they were even discussing it. Let's just head to the arcade. Bakugo wanted to press further, but then he felt something sticky on his foot. Looking down, he saw green sludge sliding around underneath the group. A sense of unease washed over him as the sludge expanded upwards, revealing 2 red eyes and a grinning mouth. The creature declared that it had found its targets and was eager for revenge on All Might. With that, the sludge lunged toward the group of kids. The ground trembled as 𝐒𝐬𝐬 fell backward onto the street, careful not to collide with any buildings. She shrank down, rubbing her face to clear the gunk from her eye. It was clear that the situation was unpleasant, and she expressed her discontent, pointing out how rude it was to spit on a lady. The villain, Amphibian, responded with a sneering tone, showing no regard for her feelings. He was a B-rank villain, notorious for his slippery nature and a history of serious crimes. 𝐒𝐬𝐬 had only briefly read about him. His quirk allowed him to mutate his body, crawl on walls, and spit mucus, making him a formidable opponent. She quickly realized that he was faster than she anticipated, dodging her attacks with ease and demonstrating surprising strength by lifting cars to strike her. As she struggled to rise, Amphibian taunted her, mocking her as he pressed her down. He seemed to relish the idea of causing chaos and taking down a hero in public. 𝐒𝐬𝐬's heart raced with fear. She didn't want to meet her end there. Just as Amphibian prepared to deliver a final blow, a voice from a distance interrupted, declaring that help had arrived. Amphibian turned, confused, only to be met with a powerful punch that sent him crashing into a building. All Might stood tall, his signature smile reassuring 𝐒𝐬𝐬 as he checked on her well-being. She admitted to feeling shaken but was relieved to have him there. All Might acknowledged the danger Amphibian posed and urged her to seek medical attention while he handled the situation. As 𝐒𝐬𝐬 made her way to the ambulance, more police cruisers arrived, securing the area and apprehending the escaped villain. Detective Tsukachi approached All Might, expressing relief that he had managed the incident. They discussed the rising crime rates and the ongoing search for the remaining escaped villains. Tsukachi revealed that they had only captured a fraction of the escaped criminals and expressed concern about their benefactor. All Might inquired about any leads on the mysterious figure behind the prison break. Tsukachi explained that the convoy had been attacked by a powerful beam, leaving scorch marks and melted doors, suggesting a quirk related to acid. Most of the villains remained tight-lipped during questioning, but one had mentioned that their benefactor was terrifying. All Might thanked Tsukachi for his efforts and then shifted the conversation to his son, Izuku. Tsukachi regrettably informed him that there had been no new information, but he was still working on the case. All Might nodded, his determination renewed as he leaped away, his thoughts lingering on Izuku. The frustration of not being able to find his son weighed heavily on him, especially since their last interaction had been filled with disappointment. He vowed that when they found Izuku he would ensure that his son could live his life to the fullest, with or without a quirk. One for all was largely a burden, and All Might was the only one to endure its weight. As he leaped from building to building, he felt the steam rising from his body. He thought to himself that he couldn't falter now. Straining to maintain his transformation, he landed and reverted to his slender form, blood trickling from his mouth. He had pushed his time limit for far too long, searching for any signs of Izuku or his captor, leaving him with only 2 hours and 40 minutes left, much less than the full 3 hours he had when Izuku was still with him. He muttered to himself that Recovery Girl would be furious with him as he wiped the blood from his lips. Standing tall, he gazed up at the sky. The symbol of peace could not last much longer. The toll was becoming evident. He needed a successor soon. Evil was on the rise while he was on the decline. It was quite ironic. Suddenly, an explosion erupted nearby in an alley. Toshinori quickly turned and rushed to the stairwell to investigate. As he ran through the street, he noticed several local heroes gathered, flames raging throughout the alley. A crowd stood before them, horrified by the chaos unfolding. Toshinori attempted to push through the crowd for a better view. There, he spotted the sludge villain from 8 months prior, cackling maniacally as he lashed out with his tendrils. 𝐼𝐼𝐴𝐼𝐴𝐻 expressed his frustration, stating he couldn't strike the villain due to his intangible form. He pulled his fist back as the sludge villain retaliated with a flurry of tendrils. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 reported that he was unable to reach the villain amidst the fire and explosions, focusing instead on evacuating civilians. Backdraft struggled to control the flames, which spread more rapidly than he anticipated. 𝐼𝐴𝐻 lamented their lack of suitable quirks to combat the villain, urging that they needed someone capable to arrive soon. He silently hoped the children would hold on a little longer. The sludge villain reveled in the chaos, taunting the heroes about his plans to harm the hostages. Toshinori gasped in shock as he recognized Bakugo, struggling within the villain's grasp. The sludge villain attempted to silence him, threatening to use Bakugo's body for his own revenge against All Might. Just then, another voice called out, and Toshinori turned to see his daughter, Izumi, encased in a protective telekinetic barrier, struggling against the sludge villain's assault. Toshinori stood frozen, torn between the urge to rush in and the pain in his abdomen that held him back. He watched helplessly as Izumi fought against the pressure. Meanwhile, Achiko Uraraka was walking down the street, texting her parents about her day at school when a loud explosion echoed a few blocks ahead. Curiosity piqued, she hurried toward the commotion, weaving through the crowd that had gathered. As she reached the front, her heart sank at the sight of flames engulfing the alley and the sludge villain thrashing about. She witnessed 𝐼𝐴𝐻 attempt an attack, only to find it ineffective against the amorphous creature. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 was busy evacuating civilians, while Backdraft struggled to contain the flames. 𝐼𝐴𝐻 voiced his frustration, realizing they lacked the necessary quirks to stop the villain. Uraraka felt a surge of panic as she saw Bakugo's terrified face, trapped and gasping for air. The sludge villain continued his taunts, threatening to eliminate both Bakugo and Izumi. Uraraka watched in horror as Izumi, caught in the villain's grasp, struggled to maintain her barrier, which flickered under the pressure. Memories from her childhood flashed through her mind, reminding her of a time when she had fallen from a slide and a boy had saved her by cushioning her fall with his own body. Determined to act, Uraraka felt a rush of adrenaline. She knew she had to do something to help her friends. The boy, a mere silhouette in her memory, reassured her that he was fine, though his face remained obscured. She questioned why he had acted so bravely, risking himself for her sake. He stammered that his body had moved on its own, unable to stand by while someone was in danger. His words tumbled out in a rush, and she couldn't help but laugh at his embarrassment, a reminder of his kindness from her childhood. As she snapped back to the present, she realized she was running toward the villain. Death Arms shouted for her to stop, warning her of the danger. Both the villain and Bakugo turned to see 𝐼𝐼𝐬 navigating the wreckage of the alley, dodging flames and explosions. Panic surged through her mind as she searched for a solution until she spotted a trash can nearby. Using her quirk, she lifted it and hurled it at the villain, aiming for his eyes. He howled in pain, releasing Bakugo just long enough for him to catch his breath. This also allowed Izumi to regain her composure and see 𝐼𝐼𝐬 rushing toward Bakugo. Yagi was astonished to see 𝐼𝐼𝐬 there, and when she noticed 𝐼𝐼𝐬 trying to pull Bakugo away, she exclaimed in disbelief. 𝐼𝐼𝐬 struggled to free Bakugo from the sludge, insisting that despite their differences, she couldn't bear to see him perish. The thought of Izuku flashed in their minds, prompting Yagi to snap out of her daze when 𝐼𝐼𝐬 urged her to use her quirk to help. Nodding in agreement, 𝐼𝐼𝐬 lightened Bakugo while Yagi pulled him free from the villain's grasp. The villain, realizing what was happening, prepared to attack the trio. Time seemed to slow for 𝐼𝐼𝐬 as she remembered a moment from her childhood. She had declared her dream of becoming a hero to her parents, who encouraged her to pursue her aspirations without worry. As she braced herself in front of Izumi and Bakugo, she felt a pang of guilt for her parents' sacrifices. The pro-heroes watched in horror as the villain lunged at the children, but just then, a cloud of smoke obscured their view. When it cleared, the kids were unharmed, and they looked up to see All Might standing above them, having intercepted the attack. He reflected on the dangers of being a pro-hero, realizing he had not fully practiced what he preached. With a fierce glare directed at the villain, he proclaimed that heroes always give their all to protect others. As he prepared to strike, blood trickled from his mouth, but he summoned his strength for a powerful punch. The villain shouted in defiance, but All Might unleashed a devastating blow, creating a whirlwind of energy that extinguished the flames and sent the sludge villain flying. All Might shielded the three children from the force of the impact, and when the chaos settled, rain began to fall. The crowd was momentarily stunned before erupting into cheers for All Might, who had saved the day with a single punch, reaffirming his status as their #1 hero. Across the street, the League observed the unfolding chaos, particularly Fushoku and Kurojari. While Tog Himiko and Twice were on a separate mission, Fushoku silently relished the sight of Katsuki struggling against the villain. He took satisfaction in Katsuki's desperate situation and Izumi's cries, feeling a sense of joy at the hero's inability to intervene effectively. However, he was taken aback when he saw a brown-haired girl rush in to help, using a trash can to distract the villain and provide breathing room for Katsuki and Izumi. He found himself impressed by her bravery. As the girl and Izumi managed to pull Katsuki to safety, Fushoku's expression hardened as the final confrontation began. Smoke filled the area, and when it cleared, All Might stood victorious after delivering a powerful Detroit smash that defeated the villain. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Kurojari approached Fushoku, noting that the attempt on his past had failed. Fushoku sighed, acknowledging that while this attempt had not succeeded, there would be more opportunities. He had not fully trusted the villain's capabilities and had hoped for failure, wanting to take matters into his own hands. He turned to Kurojari, ready to leave, and they stepped through a warp gate back to their hideout. As Fushoku walked through, he recalled a conversation with his sensei after a successful mission. Upon his arrival, he was greeted by his sensei, who praised him for gaining new followers and becoming a formidable villain at such a young age. Fushoku expressed his gratitude, crediting his mentor for guiding him on this path. Now, regarding the plan for you, there was a need for a schedule to gather information about All Might's whereabouts. Despite being an impressive 7-foot figure, he had a remarkable ability to evade detection. There were indeed methods to obtain that information, and a strategy was in place to have a spy infiltrate the school. However, acquiring a schedule wouldn't be straightforward. Perhaps a distraction could prove beneficial. After a brief pause, Fushoku gathered the courage to inquire further. He wondered why he had been summoned, suspecting it wasn't just about a distant plan. Something significant must have arisen. Sensei smiled knowingly, acknowledging Fushoku's perceptiveness. He revealed that there was indeed a revelation concerning Fushoku's stepfather. The mention of his stepfather sparked a surge of emotions within Fushoku, who struggled to contain his anger. He feared for his stepfather's well-being, hoping he wasn't in dire straits. Sensei reassured him that there was no immediate danger, but he hinted at a complicated history between himself and Fushoku's stepfather. This revelation piqued Fushoku's interest, as he had never considered that his sensei had a past with his stepfather. Curiosity grew as Sensei explained that he and Fushoku's stepfather had been adversaries for a long time. Fushoku learned that his stepfather possessed something valuable that Sensei had been unable to obtain. Sensei then referenced an incident from 5 to 6 years ago when Fushoku's stepfather had undergone multiple surgeries and had not fully recovered, resulting in a significant scar on his abdomen and the loss of parts of his respiratory system. Fushoku was taken aback, realizing that Sensei had been the one responsible for the injury. Sensei recounted how he had suffered as well, losing part of his own head in the encounter. The weight of this revelation shocked Fushoku deeply. His stepfather, a pro hero, had never appeared in any articles or news, leaving Fushoku puzzled. He struggled to comprehend how his stepfather could have defeated Sensei, who was as powerful as All Might. Sensei's words only deepened his confusion, as he mentioned that All Might had also bested him. As the pieces began to fall into place, Fushoku realized that All Might had been appearing less frequently since their battle. Sensei's grin suggested he was aware of Fushoku's dawning understanding. The truth struck Fushoku like a wave. His stepfather, Toshinori Yagi, was indeed All Might. He wanted to accept this revelation, but it felt surreal. He needed to witness Toshinori transform into the symbol of peace. When the moment came, it was swift. Just before a villain attacked a group of children, Toshinori moved with incredible speed, and in an instant, All Might stood in his place, confronting the threat. Fushoku noticed the BLD trickling from All Might's mouth, a detail most would overlook, but his keen observations revealed the truth. Everything began to align in Fushoku's mind. His father's frequent absences, his late-night returns, and his attempts to uplift others with puns all pointed to All Might. It was the perfect disguise. No one would suspect that the symbol of peace could be a frail man. Fushoku understood why Sensei had chosen this moment to reveal the truth. With Toshinori and All Might being the same person, the one who had crushed his dreams was both his father and his idol. This realization justified Fushoku's thoughts of revenge as he returned to the bar to plan his next move. Meanwhile, Achiko Uraraka was making her way back to her apartment after being released by the police. She needed to unwind after her harrowing experience. Though she had been reprimanded for entering a dangerous area and using her quirk improperly, her actions had saved a boy from a villain's grasp, allowing her to leave with just a warning. As the golden sunset bathed the streets, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. Turning around, she spotted Bakugo and Yagi coming up behind her. Bakugo wasted no time, stepping close and asserting that he hadn't needed her help during the incident. He declared his ambition to become the #1 hero and warned her not to underestimate him before storming off, leaving Uraraka feeling confused and frustrated. Yagi, more polite than Bakugo, apologized for his friend's behavior, expressing gratitude for her assistance. He mentioned that he wouldn't be here without her help, which resonated with Uraraka, reminding her of Izuku's protective nature. She managed to smile and wished him luck, hoping they would meet again at U. As Yagi walked away, Uraraka turned to continue home when suddenly, a booming voice announced the arrival of All Might. Caught off guard, she screamed in surprise at the sudden appearance of the #1 hero. All Might attempted to introduce himself but was interrupted by a violent cough, causing him to spit out a concerning amount of BLD. Uraraka's shock escalated, and she demanded to know what had happened and who he really was. Toshinori, after calming her down, began to explain the truth behind his transformation, revealing the scar hidden beneath his shirt. Uraraka felt a wave of nausea wash over her at the sight before her. All Might, the legendary hero, revealed that he had sustained serious injuries during a recent battle with a villain. He had lost part of his left lung and his entire stomach, limiting his ability to be a hero to just 3 hours a day. Uraraka was taken aback by this revelation. It seemed almost unbelievable, yet she could sense the sincerity in his words. He continued, expressing his frustration at having reached his limit before the sludge villain attacked. Watching from the sidelines had made him feel powerless, but he turned his attention to 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐼, acknowledging her bravery. He praised her for rushing in to save 2 children without a second thought for her own safety, unlike many other heroes present. 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐼 was nearly speechless, overwhelmed by the recognition from the #1 hero. It felt surreal to receive such praise. All Might shared a saying often told about the greatest heroes: "My body would move before my mind." He asked if that had happened to her, and she nodded, still in disbelief. All Might paused, realizing he had not caught her name. This moment shifted the focus back to 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐼. She stammered as she introduced herself, "My name is 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐼. Izuku Yagi." With a warm smile, Toshinori, known as All Might, declared that he believed she had the potential to become one of the greatest heroes of their time, perhaps even surpassing him as the new symbol of peace. He deemed her worthy of his power, igniting a spark of hope within her.